ladies and gentlemen, it's finally happening. Just can't get over the fact that we're finally getting Lionel Johnson and Roboute Guilliman meeting. So much so, apparently I can't even get my words out properly. But it also makes me think one thing. I can't believe it is the guy from Space Marine, the video game, who is going to be facilitating this. If you have not heard, at the end of the 500 Worlds campaign, one of the books is an 80-page book that just is all lore, and at the end of that, we find out that the Rock and the Dark Angels are coming into Imperium Sanctus, and they are heading to the 500 Worlds of Ultramar. And this is notable for a few reasons, but it's especially important because the last time the Lion went to Macragge, he kind of nuked Macragge. So Captain Titus, understandably pretty concerned about the return of Lionel Johnson to the homeworld of the Ultramarines. But hey ho, we live, we learn. So we're gonna discuss today, I guess, whether history will have learned from its mistakes, and immediately we can kind of assume that the answer is going to be yes. So the fascinating thing about Roboute Guilliman and Lionel Johnson is that they have probably the most developed relationship out of all of the Primarch brothers. I know that might sound odd to some of you 40k fans if you're not big book people, because typically if you think of the big relationships, you think of the Lion and Russ, or you think of Ferrus and Fulgrim. But the truth is that throughout the Horus Heresy series, we get quite fleeting glimpses into the Great Crusade most of the time. And in the Horus Heresy, of course, a lot of the Primarchs are not near each other. They're cut off from one another, or they die very early on into the Horus Heresy. So we don't actually get too much on them. In terms of the Primarchs, who we actually get a real deep dive into their relationship and how they view each other, we have Lionel Johnson and Roboute Guilliman like outclassing everybody pretty much, and their relationship is incredibly complex. One of my favorite little passages to ever bring up in a video, because it always ends up bringing in lots of people to have a go at me, which yeah, we'll do that again. Hi chat, how you doing? Is a passage from Unremembered Empire, where when Roboute Guilliman and the Lion meet in the Heresy, Guilliman has these thoughts to himself, and he thinks about the Primarchs that he likes and the Primarchs that he looks up to. And there are lots of Primarchs that have aspects that he admires and looks up to, but he says there's only two Primarchs that he's ever truly admired, ever truly looked up to, ever truly felt dwarfed by when he was in their presence. And those are Horus Lupercal, who is now a traitor, and Lionel Johnson, the Primarch of the Dark Angels. And yet, despite this, I mean, even if we just think about that for a second, that's a mad thing to say. That's at a time when, in that book, Roboute Guilliman will go on to make Sanguinius the Emperor, and yet he still only feels dwarfed by the Lion and not Sanguinius. And this is, I think, is drastically misunderstood by the Warhammer 40k community, quite understandably, because people assume that Sanguinius is the one everybody likes more. But weirdly, it's not Sanguinius, it's the Lion that Guilliman says he feels dwarfed by in his presence, and the only brother he truly admires. Wild as passages go. Then, of course, when the Lion actually does come face to face with Guilliman, Guilliman has another thought where he also thinks, couldn't it have been anybody else? Why did it have to be the Lion? This is the same book. This isn't like different authors having kind of conflicting ideas or whatever. This is just Roboute Guilliman having a really like bizarre and complex relationship with the Lion, and you can immediately see why, because their reunion on Macragge is a disaster, as disasters go. And I think very obviously something Games Workshop is trying to mirror in 40k, because it's one of the moments from the Heresy that I remember really standing out to me when I first read it. By the time we get to 40k, of course, a lot of this is in the past. I mean, as the Horus Heresy ends, Leman Russ in particular, we see go through this like massive journey. It is a complete 180 from the Primarch he was at the beginning of the Heresy. But all of the Primarchs have gone through so much. And when we see the Scouring, for example, when the Lion and Russ actually come to Terra, they're now all buddy-buddy after the Lion kind of, he had his last kind of spat, as it were, with his sanity, where he stabs Leman Russ through the chest. And after that, that was kind of like the last like ridiculous thing the Lion does, apparently, because after that point the Lion and Russ are like bizarrely reasonable. They get along very well, according to Leman Russ. That was like the point where all the poison in their relationship kind of bled out, and it's only after that point that they're kind of best friends. And they're just kind of like being all normal in the book. They are receptive, and they are listening to what humans say, and they're just trying to do what the best things are for the Imperium. It's all very grown up. And of course then the Lion will leave Terra, which we haven't seen in this scouring yet, but of course we know to be true. He will leave Terra, he will go back to Caliban. Something will happen there, and Caliban will be lost. The Lion will be lost for 10,000 years. And 10,000 years later, when the Lion wakes up, of course, he thinks at first that he's the only Primarch, because I mean the legends say that he's heard legends of what all the humans have around him, and they all make it clear that all the Primarchs were lost after the Horus Heresy, or during, and he thinks, you know what, I'm not even going to head to Terra. I'm going to try and save as much of the Imperium as possible, and he forms the Lion's Protectorate, and then he actually runs in to Dante, of all places. So let's play this. A group of 10 Space Marines emerge from the gunship, and between them comes a warrior in incredibly ornate golden plate, with a jump pack rising from his back and his face masked. The Lion's eyes fall upon that mask, and rage fills him. "Who are you?" he demands, striding forward. The assembled Blood Angels, who had their weapons held neutrally in parade form, bring them up to ready positions as one, although they do not yet aim them. The Lion does not care. "Who are you?" he repeats, louder and more angry. "To wear my brother's face." They are Sanguinius's features, cast in gold, and drawn in the expression of rage and grief that reaches out and tears at the Lion's heart all over again. "Stand down, brothers," the masked warrior orders, and the Blood Angels lower their weapons once more. Then the golden-armored commander reaches up and removes his helm, revealing the face beneath. The Lion can see the distant echo of the angel there, but greatly distilled by time. The warrior's long hair, which spills loose, is jet black, but threaded with silver, and his pale skin is drawn tight over high cheekbones, with faint blue veins visible beneath it. For all the power and command this Space Marine radiates, the Lion can tell that he is ancient. "I am Dante, commander of the Blood Angels," the golden-armored warrior says. "I greet you, Lionel Johnson, Lord of the Dark Angels and son of the Emperor." The Blood Angels drop to one knee, just as smoothly as their Thunderhawks landed. The Lion frowns, abruptly feeling as though he has been wrong-footed. "You are satisfied with my identity? If you will forgive me, Lord, you are older than I expected," Dante says, still on one knee. "But to have so readily and unprompted recognized the face of our Gene Father says much. Besides, I have served the Emperor for over 1,000 years, and I have yet to meet a being with the same bearing as a Primarch, save for another Primarch." The Lion blinks. Over 1,000 years. Dante was ancient indeed. "Wait," he says, his mouth dry. "Another Primarch? Get up, all of you," he adds. "Just tell me, one of my brothers yet lives." "My apologies, my Lord Lion," Dante says, rising back to his feet along with his warriors. "I assumed word had arrived ahead of us. Lord Guilliman of Ultramar was revived and healed from the stasis in which he has been locked for millennia, and has launched the Indomitus Crusade to take back the Imperium from its enemies. He fought his way through the Great Rift and came to the rescue of my chapter and our blood brothers, and brought reinforcements with him in the shape of the Primaris Marines, a new breed of warrior developed over 10,000 years." The Lion's thoughts are whirling. The Imperium still exists. He is not being denounced as an imposter and plunged into an ugly civil war against his brother's sons. There are other bastions of humanity out there in the galaxy with which he can link up and fight back the darkness. However, one thought rises to the surface above all others. Roboute, I am not alone. So despite everything they go through in the heresy, despite the difficulties in their relationship, it turns out that the Lion is actually really happy to find out that Guilliman still lives. And Guilliman does mention the lion multiple times in the novel where we see him return, where he finds out, of course, that it was the lion. He finds out, of course, that it was Guilliman that broke up his legion into chapters. He finds out that he, of course, reminisces on the mistakes they made throughout the heresy, and yet still, he's actually really glad to see Guilliman is still alive, and he's got someone of his caliber still going in the galaxy. And this is where we now have to think about how the lion is going to react to Guilliman face to face. So, like I say, at the end of 500 Worlds, we find out that the lion has actually, he's gone through the Great Rift to the other side, which is something he said he wasn't going to do because he wants to meet up with Guilliman. And like I say, this wasn't something he intended. So he is specifically asked about this when he returns, because of course, when he wakes up, his immediate thought is exactly the same as Guilliman's. I've got to get to Terra. I've got to speak to Dad. I've got to find out if he's still alive. And then after everything he goes through in that novel, and like it's not an exaggeration to say the lion gets the greatest humbling of any character in 40K. After that point, he actually decides to just stay in Imperium Nihilus, be the Knight of Nihilus, save as many worlds within humanity, and he realizes a lot more about his purpose and why the Emperor created him. And quite like brutally, he thinks of himself as he's just a killer, and he's not supposed to be the new War Master or whatever you want to call it as an equivalent. And that is a big stark difference to what we see in the Heresy and the Great Crusade, because not only was the lion this incredible warrior that even Guilliman looked up to, everybody looked up to the lion. And we actually see that according to Alfarius, and it's according to Alfarius, so fair enough, but according to Alfarius, the lion was one of the favorites to be War Master, perhaps the favorite, before the Rangdan Xenocides, where the Dark Angels lost about 60% of their legion. And so on Terra, everybody liked the lion. They wanted the lion to be the next War Master. Then, of course, the Dark Angels suffer these massive losses, and Horus is made the War Master after that. But even after Horus's treachery is revealed, the lion is still making plays to be the next War Master. When he talks to Perturabo, before they find out about Perturabo also being a traitor, he still wants to be the War Master, and he's trying to get support from Perturabo, and therefore this of course is a big mistake in the long run. But the lion is constantly angling for that position as first among equals, the Primarch of Primarchs. He just wants to be that. And so then we get to a 40K lion, where all of a sudden now the lion's going, oh no, I don't want to be the leader of the Imperium. I'm not even going to go to Terra. I'm just going to serve humanity, serve as many people as possible. And now he is off to meet the guy from Space Marine, and that is fucking crazy to me. I remember, imagine, think back to when you played that Space Marine game as a kid, that character is going to be the character to meet Lionel Johnson in Imperium Sanctus and reintroduce him to the core elements of the modern day Imperium. That's mental. That is just nuts. It boggles the mind. But weirdly, there's going to be a little bit of a delay, it seems, between Titus meeting the lion and Guilliman meeting the lion. In modern 40K lore, Guilliman has gone back to the Pariah Nexus. That's going to be a big campaign that we're going to see in the future, where we've already had a big Pariah Nexus campaign. Technically, we've had two Pariah Nexus campaigns. We have the Pariah Nexus campaign in the novel, The Silent King, then some time lapses. Then we have the second Pariah Nexus campaign. And in the second Pariah Nexus campaign, you have the Silent King against Imhotep the Stormlord. Belisarius Cool is there. He starts throwing crazy Dark Age technology weapons. The Mechanicus blow up a lot of stuff. The Silent King initially kind of disregards them, and then they do more and more stuff, and it gets completely out of hand. And then Vashtor the Arcaphane rocks up with the remnants of Caliban kind of appear into the Pariah Nexus. It's just all kicking off. And then Guilliman's about to turn up. So Guilliman might well find out about the lion's return in that campaign, because that has to come out first. And in addition to that, the lion is going to literally see the old world of Caliban sort of reformed by chaos. And so maybe that's an avenue for Vashtor to kind of taunt Guilliman about the return of his brother, because Vashtor will know, or maybe maybe Guilliman will kind of start putting things together that something mad has gone on with the Dark Angels, and it's all a bit much. And you know, at the start of this video, or the start of the stream, I called it "Those Who Do Not Learn from History," and here we come to kind of the biggest problem the Lion's going to have when he runs into Guilliman, because there is a reason that Vashtor the Archifane and Abaddon the Despoiler are able to go ahead with this plan to find this ultimate weapon, which we don't know what it is. And it's because of secrets, not exclusively, but part of it is because of the secrets that the Dark Angels kept from everybody else. And they are secrets that Roboute Guilliman specifically tried to uncover in the Heresy. And they are all related to the Tukolka engine. I'm going to say the Tukolka engine, but that's just because it's easier to say that. And this is an ancient warp drive, ancient old ones warp drive is what it's alleged to be, which the Dark Angels find in the Heresy. They race to it and get to it before Typhon or Typhus can get to it. And they then start using this old ones warp drive that's incredibly powerful. And because they've got this very powerful piece of old ones tech, the Ultramarines and Guilliman are a bit surprised by this, because the Dark Angels are able to do all this crazy stuff, that they know stuff about the galaxy that no one else seems to know. And Guilliman like challenges the Lion on this, and he has to know what's going on. How can you know all of these things? And the Lion doesn't want to reveal his secrets. He doesn't want to reveal the fact that he's got this secret tech, so he hides the existence of this technology from Guilliman. And 10,000 years later, Vashtor the Archifane will recover that technology along with its system engines, and he will create the dissonance engine that is now threatening the entire Imperium. So the question becomes, will the Lion actually like reveal to Guilliman that, you know, that thing you asked me about 10,000 years ago, my bad, forces of chaos now have that, could be a big problem. So there's the lore is in a really interesting place. And even just the reunion of the Lion and Guilliman is going to be nuts, because they will land, you know, on Macragge. And like I said, the last time the Lion and Guilliman did it, yes, the Guilliman looked up to the Lion, but he also kind of hated the Lion, and the Lion doesn't seem to care. You know, when he lands, he's the Lion at his peak. He is such a knob, and she's showing off, and Guilliman literally like says this. He's like, the Lion is just showing off. All the Dark Angels land in their perfect formation, and you got planes doing swoops and dives and all this kind of cool stuff. And the Lion just looks perfect, of course. But secretly, the entire time, the Lion has got Konrad Curze on his flagship, the Invincible Reason, and because he'd captured him during the Heresy, and Konrad Curze has escaped and fires all of the Dark Angels drop pods at Macragge. Because here's the thing, Roboute Guilliman does what the Lion does what pretty much everyone does, which is accuse Guilliman of heresy. And the reason he thinks Guilliman might be a heretic is because he's sort of taking advantage of the current, state of the Imperium during the heresy to be his own emperor, create a little Imperium of his own, which everyone thinks is Guilliman's dream. It's not really, but everyone thinks it is. And so he actually gets all the Dark Angels on guard. They're prepared to go to war against the Ultramarines if the Lion gives the signal, because Guilliman may have turned against the Emperor. However, when Konrad Curze escapes, he actually decides to press the button anyway, and he fires all the Dark Angels at Macragge. And the Lion all of a sudden has to switch from being the Primarch, who's just this incredible warrior that everyone loves, to this Primarch on his knees, like begging Guilliman, please don't shoot my sons out the sky. This is Curze's doing. But immediately, of course, their relationship and allyship during the heresy sort of starts to fall apart, because now Guilliman has immediately discovered that Curze is keeping things from that the Lion is keeping things from him. In this case, the existence and survival of Konrad Curze. They do fight together later on in Unremembered Empire, and they do have a kind of a grudging relationship, and they generally speaking get along. And in particular, at the end, it seems that the Lion and Guilliman's relationship is largely healed, because they have this final moment on their bridge, on the bridge where we have Guilliman, Sanguinius, and the Lion. And the Lion and Guilliman, of course, have started to understand that the Sanguinius's foresight is, I mean, it's pretty spot on a lot of the time, and Sanguinius believes he's off to his death, and so they kind of all sort of know that this is the last time they'll see Sanguinius, and it was indeed. And it's after that point that we get the Sanguinius going to Terra, the Ultramarines distracting the traitors, and the Lion going off to destroy Homeworld, which is a whole kettle of fish in and of itself. And it is a pretty bittersweet moment, really, because during the heresy and long afterwards, it was said that the Lion was accused of maybe actually siding with the traitors, or maybe the Lion decided to attack the traitor Homeworlds out of vanity or something. And sometimes I've even seen YouTubers say this. But actually, that's not true. So in the book Ruinstorm, the Lion discovers what we, the readers, know, obviously, but the Primarchs don't know this, the Space Marines don't know this, which is the nature of the warp and how it's a reflection of reality. And he discovers that there are things in reality that if you destroy them, their reflection in the warp will be weakened. Like if you have less worshippers of Nurgle destroyed, Nurgle won't grow in power as much. So he discovers, for example, there's this world that if he destroys it, it weakens this kind of like demonic wall that's causing a big problem for the Loyalists and stopping them getting to Terra. And so the Lion sort of discovers this reality, and given that he can't really get to Terra, he decides to attack the traitor Homeworlds. And he doesn't actually realize how right he was to do this. So the destruction of the traitor Homeworlds weakened those aspects of the traitors that exist within the warp. So for example, when Sanguinius fights against Angron in the heresy, we know that Angron was actually weaker than he should have been. World Eaters fans, that's your one victory from the Sanguinius versus Angron fight. And the reason he's weaker than he should have been is because the Dark Angels destroyed New Syria just before, and that meant that Angron lost some power which he wouldn't regain until the World Eaters claim a new world after the heresy. And so the actions of the Lion actually did directly help the Loyalists. Controversially, I would say the Guilliman's actions didn't really help the Loyalists at all during the heresy, because they get there way too late. By the time Guilliman gets to the Sol System, it's basically just drowned in the warp, and so Horus can just kind of hold him at bay with his near infinite power. It's just not a problem for him. So the Ultramarines weirdly don't help much in the heresy itself. They are important for the cleanup. They kill a lot of traitors in the cleanup, and that is very important for 40k. But weirdly, the Lion has a much greater impact on the Emperor's fight versus Horus, and like even Sanguinius's combats throughout the heresy, than Guilliman does, because of his actions of destroying the traitor Homeworlds. But to circle back, like, the Lion doesn't know this. The Lion doesn't know this. So when the Lion thinks about Sanguinius, he sort of thinks about his own failings and thinks about how maybe he should have gone with Sanguinius or worked with Roboute Guilliman, or maybe there was more he could have done. But actually the Lion, like, bizarrely, did the best thing he could have done in saving Sanguinius. And so it's a very fascinating story. Sorry, that was quite a lot, and I'm very overexcited, and I can't stop thinking about the Lion. Hello chat, how are you doing today, guys? Are you all as excited as me? I would guess so. I feel like I take quite a lot of opportunities on this channel to talk and rant about the Lion, but this seems justified, right? This seems definitely justified. Thank you so much, everybody who's gifted memberships. Oh my god, I missed some of them. That's so incredibly kind, everybody that does that. Thank you so much, everybody who joins the channel. Please do jump into the members Discord as well if you want to talk more about 40k. I am going to get back to the regular streaming. You'll notice I've updated the what's it called, my banner, what's it called, timeline, streaming schedule on the channel. So we're going to go back to Wednesday, Friday, and then Sunday for members. So yes, stay tuned for those. And yeah, please do hit like the bell notification, because YouTube is being like weird right now, apparently, people are saying, and they're not getting notifications. So that does, I think, it's probably the best thing you can do. And yeah, let me know what you'd like me to stream about in the future. Anyway, is this happening simultaneous with Vashdor trying to get into the webway where the Khan is at? So So we don't officially know that Vashdor is gonna get into the webway, but it seems pretty likely that that's what he's going to be doing. So and the answer is yes, it's certainly simultaneous to that. The real question is, where does this fall in relation to Guilliman's arrival into the Pariah Nexus? I would guess that that's simultaneous, because I think that I imagine part of this, because it's really important to make clear, this is like the last page of the book, and like it's not set up or anything like that. This is like this is the end credit scene of 500 Worlds. It's basically what it is. And so this has been pushed in from somewhere at Games Workshop, and I honestly think it's not even an exaggeration, likely because the fans have been talking about this for so long that it is very bizarre that Guilliman and the Lion haven't met. This is kind of an odd time to do it, because we've got Dawn of War 4 about to come out, and in that, of course, the Lion is not going to be on this side of the Great Rift. Probably, most likely, it's probably going to be on the other side of the Great Rift. And so it's not an Ultramarine story, and it's not, I'd love to be wrong, but I don't think Guilliman and the Lion are going to meet there. But yeah, it's sort of an odd time to do this, and I think a part of it has just become from the fact that fans have been saying how odd it is that nothing's been happening with the Lion for so long. I mean, we had Lion, chronologically, we had Cypher, Lord of the Fallen, and this story of the Cypher being told not yet by the Emperor, and Cypher being connected to the return of Roboute Guilliman. In fact, not even being connected, Cypher being instrumental in the return of Roboute Guilliman to Terra during the Terran Crusade, as he saved the Primarch of the Ultramarines from the Red Corsairs and Kairos Fateweaver. And so Guilliman is kind of already found out about traitor Dark Angels and the secrets that the Lion have kind of going too far. And then you have that, which goes into the return of Lionel Johnson, which originally chronologically comes first in the book Lionel Johnson, Lord of the Forest. And then after that, we have the Lazarus novel, where at the end of that, the Lion calls all the Dark Angels home. And then we have this kind of like rise of the Knight of Nihilus, and these rumors throughout Imperium Nihilus that there's a giant warrior serving the Emperor returned once again. And then we have the Arcs of Omen campaign, and all of this happened like 3 years ago, and or longer, and Games Workshop haven't really done anything since. And it's just sort of bizarre, because I think the only comparison people have is the return of Guilliman. And when Guilliman returned, he's had so many novels, he appears so often, and when Guilliman doesn't appear in a novel, if something's particularly important, it's kind of odd, really. At least people wonder why, because like, why isn't he involved? Why isn't he concerned about this? But of course, the reformation of the High Lords of Terror, the Dawn of Fire series, all of these are books upon books, and so Guilliman has appeared already in, I would guess, probably, maybe even as many as 20 books he makes an appearance in, and the Lion has one, and then one he sends a message. And Guilliman's been back for quite a lot longer, but still, the split doesn't make sense, does it? So it's a bit weird that things have taken so long, and I imagine that's why this has happened, because fans did notice this, Games Workshop. It was weird. There is definitely going to be tension between them, but the Raven Guard, RG, will be happier of the two for the reunion. Roboute Guilliman will be happier. So I think that because of their reunion in Unremembered Empire, I think that by the time they see each other in 40K, I'm thinking the hug's going to happen. But yeah, that's what I reckon will probably happen the most. I could see Titus being the eventual chapter master of the Ultramarines. Oh, I mean, very unlikely now that Marnius Calgar has 2 models. That's really unlikely. To be fair, Titus also has 2 models, but then he need a third. He needs a chapter master model. I do think it seems so obvious now, and Games Workshop have been trying to get in on the joke so much. Not even joke, the complaint. I think it seems pretty likely like, I honestly would be betting on Games Workshop releasing a Phobos Marnius Calgar for April Fools or something like that. I'm honestly not joking when I say I think that's going to happen, because they think this is really funny. And I don't know if you guys saw, but Games Workshop made more money than ever last year. He says my new Horus Heresy box, the one that came out this weekend, just arrived for me today, so I'm contributing to it. But they sold more Warhammer than ever. They lost a little bit of money because they didn't have Space Marine 2 last year, or any kind of big external franchise, whatever they call it, external money injection. And so they didn't make more money overall, I don't think, but they're still selling more Warhammer than ever. And this year they've got 2 video games, Dawn of War 4 and Total War Warhammer 40K, which are set to be very big. But ultimately Games Workshop's just kind of crushing it in the making money department, so we'll see. It's sort of a fascinating insight of like corporate sabotage, really, where Games Workshop do make these decisions that are really could hurt them down the line. It's hard to say conclusively, because to be fair, they do make a fuck ton of money, but they are making some weird decisions that they have to be careful to make sure that they are not going to do too much to piss off the fans, because it's not exactly the most stable business model in the world, let's be honest with you. Neither is being a 40k YouTuber, but it's fine. We'll be fine. Anyway, hey Sandman, the warp has gone when Rogot and the Emperor returned. Oh, we're way off base here. The gate below Terra could theoretically not spit out demons, so there was a chance for the Emperor to resurrect after dying. So that's a great question. So yes, I guess technically you're right. You're right. If the Emperor had been off the Golden Throne during that period, it is entirely possible that the Chaos Gods wouldn't have been able to kind of launch any sort of attack, by which I mean demons spill into Terra. There's just a lot of what ifs, and the Chaos Gods being gone, or the warp being gone, is something we know so little about right now in Scouring. So if you're not familiar with what Abdul was talking about there, in the new novel that came out, Ashes of the Imperium, there's this kind of back and forth on whether the warp has gone. And it's actually one of the reasons that Dawn and Guilliman are already starting to disagree, because is the forces of chaos have of course been banished from Terra. There's no more demons on Terra, but the warp is also so calm that some people can't use psychic powers initially, and the traitors can't even summon demons without massive sacrifice. So something has happened, and it appears that during the Emperor's battle with Horus, and he needs to do a whole video on this thing, during the Emperor's battle with Horus, the Chaos Gods suffered a grievous wound, and they definitely had a bad time. They were definitely screaming as the Emperor kind of banished them back, but we don't know exactly what this all means, and it's alleged that perhaps the Chaos Gods were destroyed, the forces of chaos were killed by the Emperor, or perhaps they're just kind of sleeping or slumbering in the deep parts of the warp. So we're going to find out what's gone on there, and whether they're like when they inevitably make a return. So perhaps it would be true to say that if the Emperor had been allowed to get off the Golden Throne, he would have been able to restore himself, but we don't know whether the Chaos Gods would have then, like, perhaps it's sort of implied that what's happened is, I have to grab the exact wording, but the way I read it is that the Chaos Gods are sort of recuperating. The Emperor dealt them a wound, and so they're recuperating from their wounds, and then they're going to be restored later on. And the forces of chaos, the traitors, want to give them a bit of a jump start to help them out there. But from that point, perhaps if the Emperor had gone off the Golden Throne and the rift had opened, what if the Chaos Gods could have taken advantage of that and then all of a sudden launched a surprise attack? I don't know. We're well past it. But yeah, you do make a really interesting hypothetical. I'll be honest with you. That is quite interesting. But I guess the other thing is, can the Emperor restore himself? If the Emperor had got off the Golden Throne, is the problem just that he's on the Golden Throne, or has Horus dealt certain wounds to the Emperor that the Emperor's perpetual abilities can't really heal from, or won't be able to properly heal from? There's so many questions that we have. Even when the Emperor is let on the on the Bridge of the Vengeful Spirit, according to Malkador and Dawn, etc., it looks very much like the Emperor is going to die. The Golden Throne was needed to sustain the Emperor. And so it wasn't just his perpetual abilities that could have saved him. And on their own, I don't know if they could have saved the Emperor. But it's a great question. Definitely, yeah, massive hypothetical there. Will Guilliman talk to the Lion about Cypher? Got to happen. Definitely got to happen. There's also, I guess, they may even theoretically already have spoken in some way, the Lion and Cypher, because we haven't seen what Cypher's been doing since Lords of the Fallen. We know that the custodians were after Cypher because they were not happy about him getting so close to the Emperor, and they of course think that it was Cypher that killed him, killed a custodian. But in addition to that, we do know that the Lion has been talking to himself or talking to somebody in his kind of like secret. He has 2 rooms on the rock that he does business out of. He's got an office and a second office, and in his second office sometimes he talks to himself, and he's working on something with the Watchers in the Dark. We don't know what, so perhaps he's been conversing with characters like Cypher, maybe even characters like Guilliman, but I doubt that, but we'll see. I'm reading Belisarius' cool novels right now, so currently trying to re-establish the Ancient Ones pylons. Yes, it's pretty exciting. It's pretty big lore. I can't wait to see what they do with that. It looks like it's all part of Vashdor's plan, though, and we're going to find out. We're going to find out how that all plays out. I reckon this. My guess is that so in the past, if you don't play the tabletop game, in the past, Games Workshop have done these things where you can submit your results with friends to Games Workshop, and they aggregate all of the results, and then that drives campaign events forward. And I think a classic one, so I think what's going to happen is Belisarius Cawl will of course assembled all of these pylons across the Imperium Sanctus in spots where he can kind of close the Great Rift. And I think Vashdor and the Forces of Chaos are going to do battle over these worlds, because if Abaddon wins, if you have Guilliman versus Abaddon, if Abaddon takes more worlds, he can extend the Great Rift, and if Guilliman takes more worlds, he could close the Great Rift. So I think a really cool future campaign for Games Workshop would be to have a campaign over closing the Great Rift, or at least sections of it, or not. I don't know if anyone has enough Blackstone to close the whole thing right now, but at the very least, Cawl has the technology needed to basically like win and close the Great Rift, maybe even the Eye of Terror itself. So it's pretty nuts. Brother, can you corroborate the rumors about you and that Eldar woman? Answer me, brother. Yeah, I mean, the Lion is probably... The Lion was surprisingly cool with everything in the Heresy. In 40k. Like, even, for example, humans worshipping the Emperor, he's relatively chill with all that stuff, to be honest with you. And like Guilliman, he's not happy about it. He would like to see it change, but there's a time and a place, and there's stuff to be done. And so he's kind of accepting of that kind of thing. And so Guilliman's rather bizarre allyship with the forces of Craftworld Ulthwé is... I reckon he'll be all right with that one. I wouldn't even be surprised to see the Lion forming his own sort of bizarre allyships with Xenos in the future. But yeah, actually, there's one thing I wanted to talk about before I forget, which is about where the Lion could be really useful to Guilliman. This is my kind of theory. So I've spoken about before on the channel how there's actually a reason the Dark Angels are the first Legion. The haters, people who follow other and, let's face it, worse legions will tell you that the Dark Angels were first because it's just a number, and numbers are just numbers, man. They don't mean anything, but they mean everything. And there is a reason the Dark Angels were created first, and that reason was actually Mars, the Adeptus Mechanicum at the time. And the Emperor knew when he was creating the Space Marines, of course, that Mars could one day be a problem. And the forces of the Mechanicum were integral to the expansion of the early Imperium, but it was entirely plausible that the Martians might turn against the Master of Mankind and a civil war would erupt. So and in addition to that, he knew that the forces of the Martian cult are going to tend towards heresy as they dive into more like uncouth types of technology and artificial intelligence and all that kind of thing. And so he wanted to create the first Space Marine Legion to like keep the Mechanicum under wraps where necessary, but also this had to be secret. So he created the lion with something called the Icarus contingency, and the lion uses this 8 times in the Great Crusade. It doesn't happen in novels, but it happens in the background, something we don't know a lot about, where the lion is authorized by the Emperor to destroy Mechanicum worlds, Forge worlds, as he sees fit, as he decides to. If he comes upon a Mechanicum Forge world and they're messing around with AI, he is allowed to utilize the Icarus contingency and destroy that world, but he must do it Dark Angel style, by which I mean destroy it quickly, thoroughly, and leaving no trace, so the Mechanicum doesn't know what's happened here. And the lion does this 8 times during the Great Crusade, and he uses it again during the Heresy. And the Emperor gives the lion all of these kind of weapons, and he gives them the Dark Angels an arsenal that rivals the Adeptus Custodes, Legio Custodes at the time, because so the lion is able to do this. And that's why, you know, the lion is often talked about being like one of the favorites, because the Emperor just gave him so much more stuff than any other Primarch. And it's really important that we remember this. This is why the Dark Angels were made, to keep the Mechanicum under heel. And in 40k today, we have got an Adeptus Mechanicus who are preparing to rebel against the Imperium of Man. They're allowing the Emperor to die. The new Fabricator General, she's a bit of a knob, and she's like, you know, the Emperor's going to die. Let's just be prepared to take over everything. At least this is what the new books are saying. And so, given that the Mechanicus is already going a bit mad, perfect use of Lionel Johnson in Mon 40k to bring them back under control. So we'll see if that's kind of my theory as to what they'll do with the Emperor, with the lion, once he returns. Ardia, what happens when the lion meets the king in yellow? Fair enough. First king in yellow mention. Good question. I mean, Valdor and the lion, there's not really much on them. To be honest, this is one of the things about the Heresy that's very bizarre, and I think it's something you don't really notice when you read it. When you look back on it, it seems quite odd. Most big characters don't meet. Like, most Primarchs don't meet in the books. You don't see the lion and custodians interacting. I can tell you exactly how they get along, because these things don't happen. And that doesn't mean they don't happen outside of the books, of course, and they almost certainly do, but we don't see their interactions. You know, like my favorite one is that, like, for the lion, it said his closest brother was Jagatai Khan. And though the White Scars and the Dark Angels have interacted, there is no documented interaction of the lion and the Khan ever. In the novels, in the background books, we know it happened, but in the novels, it doesn't happen. But again, it's just one of those things where when the Khan comes back, is the lion going to be like, "Oh, my best bro, like, hey, we get along so well"? But of course, as fans, we haven't actually seen this, so it's very bizarre. So the lion and Valdor don't interact. Valdor is already in his stage of not really liking the Primarchs by the Scouring, so I'm going to guess the lion's quite high upon that list. But yeah, Constantine Valdor is giving a lot of kind of silent treatment to everybody, and he's not really talking to many people. He definitely kind of begrudgingly liked some of the loyalist Primarchs, in particular Sanguinius. And this is kind of like he kind of admits this to Rogel Dawn. It's quite a sweet moment at the end of the siege, where he says that he didn't want to like the Primarchs, and he was very against the Primarch project from the start, as were many of the custodians, almost all of the companions actually. And even still, he came to like quite a lot of the Emperor's sons, because honestly, they're just great guys. They're just lovely, lovely fellas. And so, yeah, they bizarrely do get along. But yeah, so how the lion will react to Constantine Valdor in the King of Yellow, who knows? Who knows? Did you see the GW bans any use of AI in making Warhammer stuff? Yes. I mean, one of the videos I'd quite like to do this year is a video like talking about kind of the AI lore, and I've downloaded some videos of like very kind of funny ways in which like the AI Warhammer. Some of these videos have like millions of views, and they have just complete AI fabrications, and they're just sort of like making up their own lore. I think it's quite funny. And there was a thing the other day. We've been watching the Fallout TV show. I don't know if you watch this, but the Fallout TV show, which is also by Amazon, had an AI summarize the last season. So you start a TV show, second season, it says last season on. That section of Fallout had been done by AI, and it got it wrong. So the Fallout show, they've had to change it now because there was so much pushback. But yeah, they had an AI summarized at season 1, and it got it completely wrong because AIs can't read books. They just sort of like can guess, and so they invent stuff. And so the same thing happens in these like AI YouTube videos where like they sort of invent things about the Horus Heresy which have never happened. And it's because that's what AIs do. They sort of approximate an answer, but they can't actually read and give you an answer. So it's kind of funny, really. But yeah, it's kind of good to see that that's happening. I think Games Workshop will have had a lot of pressure on that, so it's good to see them respond, because I have had messages myself from authors who work for Games Workshop when I've used thumbnails or something like that, which an author thinks is an AI. I had this where this, an artist that worked for Games Workshop messaged me and was like, "Hiya, sorry to do this, blah blah blah, but like, I like your channel, but like, you've used this thumbnail and it's AI. Please don't do that." And it wasn't. I had to like link him, the artist, to like just prove on him to think this about me. But certainly, it told me that, I mean, they do care. They care to that extent that they will message a relatively smaller YouTuber like myself and ask us not to use images if they think they're AI. So I can only imagine that Games Workshop has had a lot of pushback saying, because other companies have done, Disney and all this kind of thing, they've been using a lot of AI, and they've been saying, please don't do this to us, because for them it's their income. And it's good to see Games Workshop taking that stance, because the 40K fandom is understandably so proud of its artists. And let's face it, like, as big as the lore is and all these kind of things, where would 40K be today without the legendary artwork that it has? I mean, as great as some of the novels are, you do judge a book by its cover, and you literally wouldn't be like into 40K today, or so many people wouldn't be, without so many incredible artists who have done so much for the fandom. So it is great to see Games Workshop do that kind of thing. And yes, good point, chat. Do block the slop. Good point. As someone who is like 3 months into their Warhammer journey, why does it seem like G-Man is everywhere, but the other Primarchs are rarely talked about and seem cooler? Isn't this franchise 30 plus years old? Okay, fair enough as a question. I sometimes don't do these streams for beginners. I very rarely do, so please, it's very useful to get that kind of question, because I just kind of skip things. So if you are new to Warhammer 40K, the story for most of 40K's history is that there are no Primarchs. That's what you have to remember, that there are no Primarchs in 40K. The idea is that the 40K is this kind of stagnant, failing thing, the Imperium is, and in actual fact, it's the problem that you have is that nothing is changing, and everything is kind of getting worse and worse, and there's more enemies against the Imperium of Man, and are about to enter the Dark Days. And there are legends that these mythological heroes will one day return to save the Imperium of Man, and this is where we discover things like the Horus Heresy. And the Horus Heresy is like it's like the mythology of 40K. It's 10,000 years ago. It still affects things today in terms of the decisions that were made during those events, but it's not something we should ever know a lot about. And even the fact that we have a Horus Heresy series today was controversial at the time. It still is in some ways, because people would say, well, maybe we shouldn't find out about these mythologies and what actually happened. Maybe we should leave things in the myth, right? And then Games Workshop went, fuck that, because their company was failing, and they decided to bring back Primarchs, and they started off with Roboute Guilliman, the Primarch of the Ultramarines, and this probably was the right decision. They've made a lot of money since then, and so Roboute Guilliman is the only Primarch that's back so far. Now the Lion, he was the only one back for a while. Now the Lion is also back. As for why Guilliman gets a lot more attention than the Lion, even as a Dark Angels fan, which I am, I don't really mind that too much overall, because Guilliman is very important. He's the Lord Commander of the Imperium, and I'm very happy with the state of the Lion's lore currently. But it is odd that it's been so much. So, like I say, Guilliman is probably he makes appearances in like maybe a dozen novels. So it is, a couple dozen novels even. So it's very bizarre that the difference is so stark. I missed your super chat. Oh fuck. Can I find it? Okay, hang on. It's sorry. Yeah, I was kind of just talking for a long time. Does this mean 26 will be a lot of Dark Angels lore? Potentially. I mean, I think that I can say, because weirdly it might go the other way, in that because we're getting the video game Dawn of War 4, where we're obviously a heavy focus, we might get no actual books. I hope we're wrong about that, and that doesn't necessarily make it true, but in the past that kind of thing has happened, and at least maybe that's why we haven't had much lore over the last couple of years, or at least as much as we'd expect, is because Games Workshop have been planning for Dawn of War 4 for a while. From Archmagus, isn't G-Man in Nihilus? He is. A great question. So in Archmagus, which is kind of like one of the latest 40k novels, Guilliman is in Nihilus, but that book is not set necessarily in the current timeline. So typically in 40k, this is where, for you people who are newer to 40k, this is really weird, and you just sort of get used to it. The campaign books are normally much further ahead in timeline than the novels. So there is no novelization of Guilliman's Return, for example, but we've had the campaign book years ago. We will eventually get a novelization, but the campaign books normally push forward first, and then they sort of go back and fill things in with novels as and where they think novels will sell. It's a very bizarre way of running the company, but they just have done it this way for such a long time. And likewise, for example, the Pariah Nexus campaign, the one I was talking about, that campaign was released before the Silent King novel, which had the first campaign within the Pariah Nexus. And so they released the second campaign before the first campaign. That's how weird 40k lore is. You just sort of get used to it over time, because what happens is you look at the campaigns as this kind of the up-to-date, most recent lore developments, and occasionally you get a novel. As novels are sort of for color, they're sort of to find out the lore, the kind of the deeper secret little bits that the campaigns don't go into, and that kind of thing. It is a very, yeah, it's a tough one. Hey ho. No shade to the Lion and his war crimes, but I feel that Alfarius is more natural to contain the Mechanicum for his ability to monitor their communications and secretly sabotage them when needed. I mean, that's true. I mean, definitely true. And he's definitely going to have a great purpose. But I guess it's specifically, and this is where we sort of go into the difference between the Dark Angels and the Space Wolves. So it's often said that the Space Wolves' position as like the Emperor's Executioners was a title that was kind of given to them and not their actual role, as it were. But to be fair, I think it was the Emperor's actual intention for them. And certainly how the Space Wolves are used is for spectacle. They are to make it very clear that you do not go against the Emperor of mankind. And should you rebel against the Emperor, he will brutally bring you to heel, and the Space Wolves will be the instrument of that destruction. And it's not as savage as you might go into, because in Leman Russ's stories in the Heresy, we get this really interesting kind of conversations with Malcador about how actually there's a reason Leman Russ had to be so smart, which allegedly he is incredibly smart. And the reason for that is because if you're the person that's to swing the axe, you have to know when it's the right thing to do that. And so that's why the Emperor kind of made the Leman Russ with so much intelligence, allegedly. And so it's, yeah, the Space Wolves serve an important purpose. But where you have the Dark Angels is when you don't want it to be an example. The idea is that you've got an enemy that provides a genuine alternative to living in the Imperium of Man. And the Emperor in the Lion's Primarch novel gives this example of, I'm probably going to say this wrong. I don't know how. Someone's read the audiobook, listen to the audiobook, correct me, but in the novel, it's Hatshepsut, who's a pharaoh, an old ancient Egyptian pharaoh. And she was, according to the Emperor, so this is like the Emperor's version of history, sorry, history buffs, she was allegedly a very important and brilliant pharaoh who ended up bringing like loads of more worlds into ancient Egypt, lands into ancient Egypt, and brought a lot of peace and prosperity. However, all her temples and all her like statues were destroyed after she died by her, I think, nephew who came after her. And according to historians today, they think it was because of a change in like religion within ancient Egypt at the time, etc. But the Emperor says it's because she was so good, and her nephew, or the following successor, he wanted to make sure that nobody would look at her and think about her when like when he was in charge, because sometimes it's not enough just to kill someone. You have to remove all trace of them from existence. And the Lion says, well, if this guy tried to remove all trace of her from existence, how come you and I know her name? And the Emperor says, well, that's because her successor didn't have the Dark Angels. So that is the purpose of the Dark Angels, is when the Emperor wants to do something so bad that he can't have anybody know about it. He needs it to be the case that like this enemy is completely destroyed and removed, such that they're never going to be a problem again. And yeah, so kind of amazing. But yes, in terms of Alfarius being a use for that, definitely going to be a purpose. This is the weird thing about the Alpha Legion, though, in that they have to operate through either. They have to operate within factions that have Space Marines, like in 40K. There's a big plot line around how the Alpha Legion have infiltrated the Inquisition, because, of course, the Death Watch are an intrinsic part of how the Ordo Xenos operate. But also, they have to operate through kind of huge numbers of spies and informants, etc., etc. So it's a big problem. The Lion did nothing wrong. Great question. Something I will typically defend. There are very few times I will actually admit, because I'm a fan and a fanatic. So I'm allowed to defend my Primarch in any way that I want. So I believe that the Lion very rarely makes actual mistakes. And principal among those is him actually bombing Macragge. Because you might think like, well, he kind of does bomb Macragge, because basically during the Horus Heresy, after Conrad Kurz kind of escapes the Lion's clutches, he is a huge problem for the Unremembered Empire saga, this period of the Horus Heresy where you have Guilliman and you have Sanguinius and the Lion kind of forming this little unremembered empire, and Sanguinius is the new emperor, and they're kind of saving as much of the Imperium as possible because they're worried that the emperor has actually died and they know that they can't get through to him. And Kurz is a huge problem for them in this period because he's kind of just killing people. There's even one point where he talks about Kurz killed like millions of people. Not like those under him killed millions of people, like he killed himself millions of people. He's just a complete psycho. The Lion tried to do so much to bring Conrad Kurz to heel and was consistently thwarted by the Night Haunter because of his kind of foresight and ability to always be one step ahead of where the Lion was planning. And in Angels of Caliban, the Lion is hunting Conrad Kurz as he's been hunting Conrad Kurz for a long time. And Conrad Kurz has retreated to this part of Macragge called Illyria, which has historically been hostile to Guilliman and to Conor. And it's when he's on Illyria that in this area, when Kurz is in this area, the Lion thinks that he can kind of find a way to get Kurz out, to kind of flush Kurz out by basically scouring the area with bombs from orbit, destroying this rebellion that Kurz is fomenting, but also kind of flushing out Kurz. Guilliman, of course, decries this as insanity, says you can't do this, you can't bomb my world, and Sanguinius, understandably being the emperor at the time, sides with Guilliman and says to the Lion, you can't do this, you can't wipe out Illyria from orbit. And the Lion tries to come up with a loophole with his Dreadwing, who the Dreadwing are like the war crimes element of the Dark Angels, and they decide to, they're not going to do orbital bombardment, but they are going to convert all of these drop pods and guns into basically like bombs that are filled with phosphex and rad bombs, all this kind of thing, and they're going to fire these at Illyrium, and this is going to basically bomb Illyria anyway and circumvent Guilliman's rule of don't bomb my world by not bombing Illyria, but by throwing drop pods and ships at Illyria filled with bombs. And even though the plan works, he does bring Kurz to heel. When Guilliman finds out about this, because Kurz tells Guilliman is outraged, and he actually ends up breaking the Lion Sword over his knee, and the Lion Sword won't be fixed until after the Heresy. And that's why, if you have a look at the artwork after this book, the Lion doesn't have the Lion Sword until the Great Wolf, because his sword is broken. And that's why when Guilliman sees the Lion Sword in 40K on Cypher's back, he has a reaction to it, because for him that the Lion Sword represents the greatest betrayal the Lion ever committed, because it represents the fact that the Lion bombed his homeworld. And even for the Lion, that was way too far, according to Guilliman. But here's the thing. Someone asked earlier, does the Lion do anything wrong? Weirdly, I will still defend this. And I know this might shock you Ultramarines fans, but here's the thing. Curse was a massive problem, right? Curse was such a problem for the Loyalists. If this hadn't been done, I don't think Sanguinius would have got to Terra. I don't think the homeworlds of the traitors would have been destroyed, and potentially the entire Imperium could have been lost. And so the Lion's actions during this, as horrific as they are, may well have saved the Imperium. And it's important that we understand that that's the world in which the Lion operates. He has to do what has to be done. He's the ultimate pragmatist. So weirdly, bombing Illyria, bombing Macragge, still justifiable in my eyes. Sorry. Not sure if you saw this. GW posted a picture of the Ultramarine chapters that are participating in the 500 World campaigns, but I noticed a chapter we never saw before and wanted to get your thoughts. Interesting. Yeah, let me know. Let me know. I will say as well, one of my favorite little references in like the Dark Angel's Return and in the even 500 Worlds mentioned again is the Dark Angel's relationship with the Nova Marines. As difficult as the relationship between the Ultramarines and the Dark Angels has been, the Nova Marines are kind of the exception to the rule. So in the Heresy during the book Pharos, the Dark Angels, a bunch of them actually sacrificed themselves to save the Nova Company when they're battling the Night Lords. And the Nova Company never forgot this. They later become the Nova Marines. And 10,000 years later, when the Lion returns, when the Rock is attacked, when the Dark Angels call for aid, the Nova Marines, this Ultramarine successor chapter, are the first to answer the call. And I thought that was, I mean, it nearly made me tear up. It was just so beautiful. I love when 40K does that so much, man. I think we are in Hero Hammer now, and I love it for the main chapters, but I desperately want to return to successor chapters that are more scrappy and struggling to survive. Yeah, the struggling to survive in particular is one that takes sort of a backseat nowadays because of the impact of Primaris Marines. And one of the genuine downsides of Primaris Marines was the sort of destruction of some old lore, or at least just the ending of certain storylines. So Sires of the Emperor, probably most famously, they were destroyed now. All of the original Sires of the Emperor are now gone as of Belisarius Call the Great Work, and now they're just a Primaris Space Marine chapter. And that I can understand the annoyance of that. Sires of the Emperor, actually my first 40k army as a kid, and a very beautiful scheme, did not do justice to it. But yeah, like Flesh Tearers, for example, it's a big problem because the Flesh Tearers are supposed to be about going out in the final days, and then now they've been restored with Primaris Marines, and that sort of undoes that lore. The Carcharodons in the most recent lore that we've got coming out, they're no longer as much this kind of like scavenger legion because they're still sort of, the mentality is the same, but they have been massively reinforced by Primaris Space Marines. And I guess it sort of plays into their lore quite well because they'll take whatever they can get a lot of the time. So they just took everything. It took everything that Belisarius Call gave them, or at least his subordinates gave them. So it's kind of funny, but it has sort of had a big impact on successor chapters. I hope it's Vulcan or Corvus next. What do you think? I'm still on the Khan, man. So I think that when people say they think Leman Russ will be the next Primarch to return, it's tough to really argue with them because their argument is, well, wouldn't that make loads of money for Games Workshop? And yes, is the answer to that question. I think that the return of Leman Russ has an obvious tie into the return of the Lion. Their relationship is one of the most famous relationships out of all of the Primarchs. The Space Wolf is one of the best-selling legions with a massive model range, so it makes a lot of sense to have Leman Russ. But the truth is, if we have a look at the lore, and there's not too much on Leman Russ actually returning. So when Njal looks into the future and tries to scry as to when the Primarchs, as to what's going to happen in the future, he sees Primarchs returning, and after the Guilliman, it is the Lion, and then the Khan, and then Corvus. And he doesn't see the return of Leman Russ. So something's gone on there. In Battle of the Fang, which is a novel set a couple of thousand years after the Heresy, when Magnus attacks Fenris, there are these Thousand Sons talking at the start of the book, and they say that they don't think that they know that Leman Russ isn't going to come to the aid of his sons. They know that apparently. and which tells me that they therefore are confident that Leman Russ has been waylaid, or he's been captured, or something has happened to him, and that's why he's not going to be able to save his sons. And so I've always sort of assumed that to be the case. And then, like, practically, and I think this is probably the strongest evidence, Leman Russ is said to return in the time of the Wolf Time. And in the Wolf Time, and there is a book called Wolf Time in 40K, which came out a few years ago. It's the third book of the Dawn of Fire series. And in that book, it's not the Wolf Time. It's called the Wolf Time because they discuss if it's the Wolf Time or if it's going to be the Wolf Time in the near future, to which the answer is maybe. But that's the same answer that they've been giving for 10,000 years. So who knows when Leman Russ is actually going to return. But I think it would be very weird to release a book called Wolf Time and then a few years later have the actual Wolf Time, because what would you call it? Like Wolf Time but for real, Wolf Time 2, Space Wolves Boogaloo. Like, what would you call that? It's a very weird thing to do. And the reason I use Leman Russ as the example is because I can't really argue with your but it would make a shit ton of money argument. That is fair. But in terms of what's actually happening in the lore, if we look at where the Primarch's lore is, Jagatai Khan is definitely in the best place to return, in my opinion. We don't know much at all about what's going to happen to Rogal Dorn. We don't know anything about the Iron Cage incident, really, because the lore we have is quite outdated. We don't know why he disappeared. We don't really know when he disappeared, when his disappearance was in relation to Sigismund's disappearance, or why he decided to make that decision. And certainly he goes through so much at the end of the Heresy and the Scouring. There's a lot of character development going on for Dawn, which is very exciting, but his lore is kind of all up in the air right now. Corvus Corax, as we know, he was in the warp hunting Lorgar a long time ago, but since then he's not really doing anything. And if he dropped his hunt for Lorgar, which he appears to have done, because Lorgar is now out of the warp preaching chaos again, who knows what was Corvus Corax doing? Vulcan makes the treasure hunt, goes away, is found, fights for the Imperium again, and goes away once again in the Beast Arises series. Why has he done this? Why has he made this treasure hunt? We just don't really know, and the circumstances of his deciding to leave and why he left, we don't know at all. But Jagatai Khan's lore is basically there. We basically know what it is. So the disappearance of Jagatai Khan has been written about multiple times in even in like a book form, in the first founding book, in the White Scar supplement. We get a pretty detailed explanation of Jagatai Khan's disappearance. We can kind of guess why he disappears because the book gives an explanation of why that would happen. Jagatai Khan basically decided to leave the Imperium for a purpose. And it was all, basically it was a ruse. He took the opportunity of the gate to leave his sons, and his sons have basically theorized about this over the last 10,000 years. But most importantly, the White Scars are currently in the webway looking for Jagatai Khan, the fifth company under Yogurton Khan. And we actually see this in a novel, White Scars, The Last Hunt, where at the end of the book, Iandan Farseer helps out the White Scars and gives them the information that they need to go and look for the Khan in the webway. And Games Workshop have backed this up multiple times pretty recently by releasing multiple artworks of White Scars in the webway fighting against the Drukhari. And that tells us that Games Workshop they're pretty confident in the search for Jagatai Khan. They know it's a thing, and he's out there, certainly. So the lore of the White Scars is in a pretty good place to have the Khan return right now. Pretty much all of the other loyalist Primarchs, the lore of their disappearance hasn't even been written in decades, so it's a huge problem that there's a lot that has to be covered before they can return. I think realistically, Guilliman and the Lion didn't have this problem because they didn't disappear. Really, we knew where they were for 10,000 years, so not really a problem. But the other Primarchs, you have to come up with excuses for why they disappeared, and the Khan is the only Primarch where there's a plausible explanation as to what he's been doing. Of course, will be expanded upon, and maybe he'll ally with the Harlequins or do something completely nuts. But the Khan deciding to leave his sons is very well documented, and the other Primarchs just don't have that. So I'm still high on the Khan being the next Primarch, and even if that doesn't happen, I won't admit defeat. But yeah, 2 wolves 1 time, 2 wolf 2 time, wolf time Tokyo Drift, wolf time 2 the wolfening. Yeah, for sure. Wolf 2 wolf harder. Yeah, there we go. It would have been cool to find out about the Khan in the Webway in the new Eldar book, Void Scar. That would be great. That would be a great tie-in. Unfortunately, I don't think they would have given Mike Brooks that. But yeah, they should do. They should do. I think that at the very least, they shouldn't be afraid. They shouldn't be afraid of doing that kind of thing. Likewise, for example, there's a book called a good example of this. There's a book called Apocalypse, and in that there's a world eater that taunts a Raven Guard Space Marine, and he says, you know, the legends say your father is still in the warp hunting, and like when that happened, of course, like, you know, when you read that, you're like, oh my god, they mentioned Corvus Corax. It's so cool. And I think that they shouldn't be afraid of doing that for the Drukhari and the White Scars, because of course the Drukhari would at least know about this incident and the disappearance of the White Scars, and how the Jagatai Khan, the Khan, kind of fought the Drukhari back into this Webway gate. And so I think it would make a lot of sense to have the Drukhari kind of taunt the White Scars with this information. Maybe the Lion will say to Guilliman, we need to go and take Wormwood back from Vashdor, and then use the Chakotay engine to burrow into the Webway and rescue Jagatai. It's a twofer. Yes, I mean, people always go for the twofers. I get why, of course, Becky. Like, it's pretty tempting, and it would be a hell of a story. But would Games Workshop do that, right? Like, I like to imagine, as we all do, that all of the Primarch models exist in like a cabinet in James Workshop's office, and on the cabinet it says, in case of stock price fall, break glass, and they can just release Primarchs as they need. And would they do two at once? Because it's running things very quickly. You know, we had about 6 years between the Lion and Guilliman. We've had another 3 years since the Lion. So the next Primarch should come at the end of next edition by that timeline. Admittedly, this is not an extensive data set we're working with here, guys, but it's still all we've got. One of the things that does happen in the Lion's novel is the Emperor has been communicating with Guilliman and the Lion in sort of various means, and definitely open to interpretation. With the Lion's return, he meets this character called the Fisher King, which is heavily implied to basically just be the Emperor. It can't properly communicate with the Lion, but it is the Emperor sending the Lion a message. And on this table in front of the Fisher King is 3 items. There's a chalice, there's a spear, and there's a candelabra. And so it's open to interpretation as to what those 3 things mean. But I like to think that the spear is the spear of Russ. That's typically what I would assume. So I think that we've got the chalice is the Blood Angels, the spear is Russ, and the candelabra is the Astronomicon. I think that the most likely thing is that, like, my personal theory is that the candelabra represents like the Astronomicon, and the fact that it's not shining into Imperium Nihilus means that the Lion therefore realizes that he needs to protect everybody until the light can kind of shine through once again in as many people as possible in Imperium Nihilus. I think the chalice is the Blood Angels, and the Emperor wants the Lion to safeguard the Blood Angels. The line of Sanguinius is very important, and his son should be protected without their gene father. And the final thing is the Spear of Russ. And I think if any Primarch is going to find another Primarch, having the Lion going and finding Russ it fits so well. And I think that, you know, we talked earlier about the Lion's reunion with Guilliman. One thing I didn't mention was that when the Lion is reunited with Guilliman in the Heresy, there's also some Space Wolves there, because Space Wolves basically, there are these little bands of Space Wolves that have been sent out by Leman Russ to basically check who's traitor and who's not. And when they find people that are traitors, they're supposed to kill them, even Primarchs. And quite hilariously, the Space Wolves that come to Macragge are quite open about this, and they even say to Guilliman, like, our job is to kill you if you are a traitor. And Guilliman quite hilariously asks them, just can I ask guys, like, can you kill me? Is that something you can do? And they are like, maybe we can try. So they're fantastic characters. And of course, by this point, the Lion and Leman Russ have had their fallout, and the honor duels have already started between the Space Wolves and the Dark Angels. And Guilliman says to the Lion, before we continue, you need to address this problem. And he points to the Space Wolves next to him. Fafnir Bloodbrooder, thank you so much, chat. So Fafnir Bloodbrooder is there, and the Lion is not really having it, because the Lion is thinking, we've got to get on and work to restore the Imperium. The Lion says, fine, I nominate myself as a champion. And so Fafnir, brother, has an honor duel against the Lion. He goes first and has a swing of his axe at the Lion. And the Lion, of course, throws a single punch and knocks him to the ground. And then says, like, satisfied? And Space Wolf goes, yep, absolutely fine. And they kind of carry on. But I do think it would be really fitting to have the Space Wolves be there with Guilliman when Guilliman meets the Lion, because once again, it would be a reflection of what happened in 40K. So I think it would be really cool to have the Lion drawn into an honor duel with the Space Wolves once again. And what a brilliant way to release a Bjorn the Fell-Handed model in 40K, but to have the Lion have an honor duel against a Dreadnought. I think that would be so cool. And you could do something like that. And then once again, you've got kind of this reflection of 40K where the Space Wolves in 40K, whilst, as I say, Leman Russ and the Lion, they were basically bros by the end of their scouring, or at least the disappearance of the Lion. And Leman Russ looks back on the Lion very fondly. Of course, the Space Wolves and the Dark Angels, their sons remain rivals and stay rivals through to 40K. And they have this kind of like, there's one of classic 40K relationships where it's said that when the Dark Angels and the Space Wolves team up, they can beat anyone else, but they very rarely team up because they don't like each other. And the Dark Angels did go to the aid of the Space Wolves when Fenris was attacked by Magnus, but typically they don't get along very well. And I think that it would be very fitting if Logan Grimnar like challenges the Lion to an honor duel, like, and Bjorn the Fell-Handed takes it or something like that. I think it would be really fitting. But at the very least, if the Lion and Guilliman meet and they just break into a hug and it's all a beautiful moment, having the Space Wolves be there to kind of provide a counter to that and actually maybe accuse the Lion of committing heresy, or bring up the fact that for like Bjorn the Fell-Handed, one of the last times he might have seen Lionel Johnson was when Lionel Johnson stabbed his Gene Father through the chest. And so he is not going to be very happy necessarily about seeing the Lion again. So it could be pretty fitting to have the Lion drawn into an honor duel, and then after that we can see the kind of new reformed Lion where he doesn't sort of use it as an opportunity to kind of rub things in the Space Wolves' faces, but he does take it as an opportunity to sort of maybe bring the Space Wolves onto his side, and perhaps together they announce their joint mission to go and find Leman Russ and bring him home, because there is this sort of suggestion that the Primarchs are so well connected that perhaps even they can sense each other, and maybe Lionel Johnson will be able to find Leman Russ somewhere. But I think almost certainly the first place they'll be going to is the planet of the Sorcerers. They're going to want to be asking Magnus the Red, what have you done with my brother? Where is Leman Russ? And I think that would be such a, like, imagine if 11th edition begins or something like that with the Hunt for the Wolf King campaign or something like that. Like, that is classic 40K. It would do so well. Nurgle brain. Yes. Well, to be fair, sometimes this is the problem with doing things like this. Sometimes your brain just goes, I'm not going to tell you that name. I'm going to allow you to remember it. To not remember it. But yes, such is the risk. But I kind of just like doing a lot of the lore live, and I have a really good time doing these. So thank you to you guys, I guess. And yeah, good to know so many people enjoy them. If the Wolf Spears are there, will the Lion accuse them of working with heretical Admech into that in Archmagos? I mean, to be fair, we haven't seen a Lion Belisarius Cool interaction. Will Belisarius Cool create an AI version of Lionel Johnson? That's a question. But in terms of would he accuse that, I don't think so. I think, like, there's a chance the Lion gets pulled into that storyline, I guess. The Candelabra is an obvious thing where... But the Candelabra, I think the most obvious implication is that the Emperor wants the Lion to kind of serve Imperium Nihilus until the light of the Emperor can reach through there once again, or basically work to restore the Astronomicon to Imperium Nihilus. And so perhaps Lionel Johnson will be pulled into the Belisarius Cool storyline there. Thank you. Thanks for the support, guys. I mean, so much. Do you think the reason the Lion looks so much older than Guilliman is because Guilliman was in stasis, or is it just author flat fiat? Anyway, yeah, but yes, you're right. So it's the reason the lion looks older than Guilliman is because exactly, you're right. The Guilliman was in stasis and the lion wasn't. And this was I don't know, I'd have to double check the old codexes. Maybe it was just sort of fanon that we all created. It was a Mandela effect or something, where it never actually said the lion was in stasis, but everyone sort of assumed that he was, or at the very least it made sense that the Watchers in the Dark would put him in stasis. However, of course, when the lion returned, it was revealed he wasn't, and he just looks a lot older. However, in terms of him looking a lot older than Guilliman, yes, that is true, but Guilliman still looks older. He has still aged. He is an older man, and he is talked about in the novels. He does get a little bit of grey hair, etc., and so that is definitely a thing. But in terms of why the lion was aged, I think there's two reasons for this. A, the aesthetics. The Primarchs are not. I think that they don't want the Primarchs to have the same roles as they did in the Heresy, and they're supposed to be very different characters and have gone through all this development. But also, I think it's to match Leman Russ. I said this before on the channel, where I think the reason they aged the lion was because Leman Russ has already been aged. In Leman Russ's Primarch novel, Leman Russ's Primarch novel is Leman Russ telling the story of him and the lion and their rivalry to the first Space Wolf who joins the Space Wolves after the Space Wolves become a chapter. And when he speaks to the Space Wolf, he is visibly aged. He is described as looking like a much older man. And again, it's for the aesthetics, because Logan Grimnar is a very old looking Space Wolf if you've ever seen the model or art. And so you don't want a young looking Leman Russ. It would be weird. There's the big question in terms of how it's affected the lion. As is well documented in the Lion's novel, he notices that he's slower. He notices that he's slower than he was when he was in 30k in the Heresy. But in addition to that, we have all this lore around the Primarchs being composed of warp stuff, and the Emperor reaching his hand behind the veil and pulling it back with this metaphysical goodness that he then used in the Primarch project and their creation. And so, realistically, that tells us two things, or has two implications potentially. A, the Primarchs are so much more than their physical bodies, as we see with Corvus Corax's lore. But also, if the lion is a very powerful psyker, which is what all the Primarchs are, really, I think it's very likely that the lion's personal beliefs upon himself would influence his own capabilities. So I think that the easiest explanation, and I think probably the likely one, is that the lion is slower in 40k because he believes he's slower in 40k. And he doesn't have an understanding of the warp that he should do, that he probably won't have for a while. So I think that by the time he fights Angron in Arcs of Omen, I think he's pretty much back to his old self. Like Angron, took a chunk out of Sanguinius. He poisoned Sanguinius so much, it's not even clear if Sanguinius could have survived the Heresy had Horus not killed him, because the Black Blade of Angron had poisoned the Primarch of the Blood Angels. So the lion being able to defeat Angron, even with the aid of the Emperor's shield, is a massive win for the Primarch of the Dark Angels. So yeah, I think that it's pretty likely he's back to his old self pretty much. And realistically, what the fans want, right? It's what the fans want. My confusion is that the Primarchs can age, the Custodians can't, even though there's arts of them with grey beards, and they're made pretty much the same. It's not an exact science, and the Custodians are also all quite different. They are all pretty different, so the idea that some age and some don't would make a lot of sense as well. In terms of the ones that don't age, it is said specifically that the ones that never age are the ones in the presence of the Emperor. And this is actually brought up by Diocletian Koros in his internal thoughts and writing as to a really interesting part of 40k lore, where he does sort of briefly question his loyalty to the Emperor, as to be fair, the Custodians are kind of encouraged to do. They're encouraged to be critical thinkers. And so he wonders, if the Emperor truly loved us, if the Emperor truly was the best leader of all time, isn't not a bit of a coincidence that for the Custodians, their immortality is predicated upon their loyalty to the Master of Mankind? Which is a really good question for him to ask. And so it is put out there that perhaps that's why. So the Custodians can age, and that seems relatively likely because of the Eyes of the Emperor lore. Because the Eyes of the Emperor in 40k are members of the Adeptus Custodians who, through injury or for whatever reason, have noticed that they a reaction time or whatever has dropped a tiny amount, and so they decide to leave their post and operate as the eyes of the Emperor, and basically they basically go off and they create networks of spies to act as informants for the Captain General of the Custodians. And so they seemingly can age, and it's said that the ones that can't age are the ones in the presence of the Emperor. But then that also begs the question, how many of the Custodians, of the companions, because there's 300 companions of the Custodians, and the question is how many of them are still alive from 30k? It is a relatively obvious question that is never asked in the books. Seems quite obvious to us. Like, I get it all the time when I talk about Custodians, very understandably. And we don't know. Games Workshop have deliberately, I think, not answered this question. We do know that, like, Valerian in Chris Wraith's series, he tries in Regent Shadow, he tries to join the companions and fails at the start of the book. And so they do get replaced from time to time, but the ones in the presence of the Emperor shouldn't age. So they presumably get injured or something in a blood game, whatever it's going to be. You know how the line in the Heresy says he considered Conrad his closest brother, not his most beloved, as they were the only ones who grew up alone. Interesting. I think that makes sense. I think that you can, like the Lion's upbringing, the Lion was definitely already a man by the time he was found by Luther, like, or at least he had grown to maturity as a man. So there's definitely a comparison there. And whilst there are a few kind of death worlds that the loyalists do grow up on, the Caliban is a particularly kind of dark place. But yeah, comparable to Nostromo, I'd much rather live on Caliban. With the Primarchs being warp beings, it could also be that they subconsciously view themselves as older and thus age themselves. I think that also makes a lot of sense. Do you think that would ever be mentioned again, like the Lion thinking about Kurz beyond how wretched he was and how bad he was, think on Conrad's fall beyond madness? Yeah, I think that's a relatively, because I think Sanguinius has the same thought, right, where he basically thinks exactly what you're saying there, where Sanguinius does wonder, because of course he and Conrad Kurz also have similarities, and they can both both have foresight. If their positions had been swapped, would Sanguinius have descended into madness or not? And well, yeah, I guess we don't know. I do think game-wise, if they're not going to do bad-up character refreshes, Primarchs need to be either available to ally General Space Marines, or they need to add a customizable Chapter Master sheet. Yes, a customizable Chapter Master sheet, I think, makes a lot of sense. And given that they could just sell a Chapter Master model, that seems pretty likely. I mean, in most editions, there's been a way to upgrade a character to a Chapter Master, or whatever it's going to be, so I think that makes sense. And they sell so many Primaris Lieutenants. Yeah, that works. But in terms of the running Primarchs with anybody, I mean, so for the Lion in particular, that does work well, because we do know that the Lion, because of his forest walking ability in 40k, we do know that he does fight with, at least he can fight with all of the successor chapters, and probably has done by this point. So whatever successor chapter you run for the Dark Angels, you can run the Lion and it's perfectly canon. It's really not a problem. In terms of Guilliman, I mean, we do see him having relationships with characters like Messinius in the Dawn of Fire series, who's not an Ultramarine, but a white console, and so you can make it work, but I guess it's just the color scheme. Yeah, the thing about the Lion is that the Lion's color scheme, he's not on the traditional green of the Dark Angels, or like bone or whatever, but, well, he's in black, I guess, but like, because he's got his own scheme, he sort of fits with any Dark Angels successor chapter. Joe, I hope that Perturabo is the next Primarch to return. Cheers. Thanks so much, buddy. I think that's not too far. I mean, in terms of the next Primarch to return, it could very well be a Chaos one, and at some point we will get Lorgar and Perturabo. Which way round is a really interesting one. I think that ending on Lorgar makes sense in terms of Lorgar is kind of like, just as Guilliman is like the Primarch's Primarch, he's sort of like a perfect all-rounder. The Primarch of the Wordbearers is like the traitor's traitor. He's just a demon prince and loving it. He's just having a great time. Perturabo, I think, is a much more complex character, and they have very clearly decided on Perturabo's ascension into demonhood and how that's going to happen in the Scouring, but we've yet to read it, and it's beginning now. And it looks like Perturabo's making the same mistake a lot of people make. He looks like he's going to try and control chaos as opposed to it controlling him, which is always gone well in the past. That's never been a problem. But in addition to that, his return in 40K, we don't see too much of him. So he only appears in one short story where he speaks to Honzao, previously mentioned, and he is mentioned in like Chaos Codexes, and he's even mentioned in the Death Guard Codex where he has a battle against Mortarion. But we don't see a lot of Demon Perty, and so he's very mysterious. We don't see a lot of Demon Lorgar, but like I say, there isn't too much to really do with Demon Lorgar because, like a lot of people, I think, and it's sort of a joke, but it's understandable, there's a sort of joke that Lorgar sort of wins the heresy. Like, yes, the Word Bearers do their coup, and yes, it goes badly, but at the same time, Lorgar descends, brings half of the traitors into chaos largely because of his actions and Erebus's actions, etc. But in addition to that, he sort of gets to just become a demon and worship the forces of chaos, and he's just sort of loving life. And so there's not too much to do with him. I think that the real use of Lorgar will be as a counter to like the Star Child or something like that, I reckon. Of course, his showdown versus Guilliman will be epic. But Perturabo, I think, he's a much more complex character, and understanding what Perturabo's motivations are is going to be huge, because whereas Lorgar just wants to serve the Chaos Gods, Perturabo historically wants to be independent of the Chaos Gods, but he is a Demon Prince of Chaos and Divided. In the Chaos Space Marine Codexes, we do know he has all their gifts, so like he can use gifts of Nurgle, etc. So what does Perturabo want to do? Why doesn't he spend more time attacking the Imperium? What's his long-term goals? We will see, and I am very excited for Perturabo to get more lore, because he doesn't get like a bad treatment in the Siege. Like he gets a good treatment in terms of people fawn over his ability to kind of control all of the traitors, and directs a lot of the siegecraft. But like in the book First War, Perturabo tries to bait Rogal Dawn, and he talks about how Dawn tries to bait Perturabo, and this is in the Siege of Terra, and Perturabo says like, no, I'm not going to kill you now, I'm not going to fight you, I'm going to tear down all your towers, I'm going to kill all of your sons, I'm going to kill your father, I'm going to make you watch all of this, and then once I'm done with all of that, I'm going to kill you. And then a few books later, he leaves the Siege of Terra. So, not a great ending for Perturabo there in that respect. And yeah, he's going to ascend to demonhood, and he's getting this cool lore now, but I really feel like it sort of left a little bit of a bitter taste in my mouth for Perturabo when I read that. I don't know about you guys, but that speech he gives to Rogal Dawn was epic. It was really cool, but then it never goes anywhere. So I want to see Perturabo get a bit of a not just a glow up in terms of him becoming a demon, but like a narrative satisfying glow up. Do you know what I mean? Big Monkey King, thank you again. Not sure if you read The Emperor's Spears, but apparently they don't like Guilliman. Would love to see them meet each other. I have read The Emperor's Spears. It's actually a really good book, and I think that they're one of the successor chapters that went from just 0 to hero. I didn't really know who they were before I read that book. But yeah, not everybody does like Guilliman. It is important to remember that. Not everyone was happy about it. Most people sort of drop their grievances over time, it's not just like the fandom that was saying this. It was heresy. To introduce the Primaris Space Marines was straight up heresy. To make himself Lord Commander of the Imperium, it is heresy. And in terms of, it brings us back to, I guess, his relationship with the Lion. So in the story, it is definitely quite likely, I think, that we get some sort of pushback against the Guilliman, Lion, Dante team up, as in controlling the Imperium. God. Not now, Nurgle. So, we spoke about the Unremembered Empire series earlier. In Unremembered Empire in the Heresy, it's good to remember that was heresy. That was straight up heresy. You're not allowed to do that. Even if you believe the Emperor is dead, they elected Sanguinius as a new emperor. You can't do that. There's only one emperor. It's the Emperor of Mankind. And they are deeply ashamed by this. And that's why it's called the Unremembered Empire. Because Guilliman worked hard to make sure nobody knew about it. And it's not known about in 40K. However, in the book Godblight, at the end of that novel, there's a demon called the Rainfather, and the Rainfather, this demon of Nurgle, he actually he has a battle against Chief Librarian Tigurius, the most powerful space marine in the Imperium. And Chief Librarian Tigurius does banish this demon, but before the Rainfather is banished, he allows a historiographer to discover a tome in this library, and the tome is entitled The Reign of the Emperor Sanguinius. And so one of the successes of Nurgle, I guess, during the Plague Wars is that he has managed to undercut the Imperium in that respect by revealing to the historiographers of the Imperium that Guilliman, 10,000 years earlier, already tried to form his own Imperium. And I think the reason Guy Haley's done this is because they're setting up a plotline in the future where you will have a rebellion, or you'll have a civil war of some kind, because in the Unremembered Empire you had Guilliman as Lord Commander type figure, you had the Sanguinius as the Emperor, and you had the Lion as the Lord Protector. In 40k, Guilliman has taken the position as Lord Commander, Dante is Regent of Imperium Nihilus, and the Lion is acting in a Lord Protector type role. So once again, it looks like Guilliman is just seizing power, using the Dark Angels and Blood Angels as needed. And so I think that it's a perfect reason to bring in some sort of Civil War type conflict to 40k. And yes, it's very important to remember that a lot of what Guilliman has done is heresy, is bad by the views of the Imperial cult. But Guilliman had every reason to believe that the Imperium 1.0 had been destroyed. Wouldn't it be a good thing for him to have a new Imperium for the survivors to rally around? Yes, you are right, Maurice. Like, it's totally correct to say that. Didn't Guilliman act rationally in that instant? And that is true. I guess it's just the background of this is that when Guilliman was found by the Emperor, he had already created his mini empire, the 500 Worlds of Ultramar. And so people have always accused Guilliman of wanting to be the Emperor and wanting to be a mini Emperor. And so the fact that he creates the Unremembered Empire just supports that bias that people already have against him. And that's why it's such a big deal. Now, you are right to say that they truly didn't know if the Emperor had died or not. The Warp Storm had cut off the loyalists from reaching to Terra, and Guilliman, using this Pharos device, basically saves the Dark Angels and the Blood Angels, allowing them to make it through to Macragge. And it's he acts very rationally, and he does do kind of like the sensible thing. He doesn't even, for example, put himself as Emperor. He doesn't even want to put himself as Emperor. So, like I mentioned earlier, when the Lion arrives and he says, "Oh, I wish it could have been anyone else but the Lion," he's still willing at that point in time to make the Lion the Emperor because he knows it shouldn't be him. Because Guilliman is smart enough to understand that if Guilliman makes a new Imperium and makes himself the Emperor, it's going to look like a power play. So he actually does act with quite a lot of humility, but it's just, that's not the way it's going to play to the general public should forces of chaos try to propagandize against them. What is your top 3 favorite books? Well, that's a great question. Top 3 favorite books. I think my favorite book, the one that like started this channel, like when I started the channel, I made it on a book called Saturnine, which is probably my favorite book to this day. I think Amber King is actually doing a video on it at the moment, so we'll watch that when it comes out. But yeah, it's a book that takes place about halfway through the Siege of Terra, and it's like Space Marine porn. If you don't care about Space Marines, this book is nothing to you. But if you care about Space Marines, it's a big deal. And so many major plot points start in this. That book has like the start of the Terminus Decree, the start of the Inquisition. It has Rogel Dawn's one of his best moments. It has like all of this huge, incredible team up of all of these amazing Space Marines. It has one of Jagatai Khan's best moments. It's just all round an incredible book. And it's just, yeah, complete fan service to people who love loyalists. And it also ends with the best cliffhanger in 40k and the greatest retcon that's ever happened, which is the Dark Angels arriving in the Sol System, which at the time was madness when that happened. Anyway, so that's probably my favorite book, and literally made me start this channel. And I didn't like keep it up, and like I didn't make content for ages, and I came back to it and blah blah blah. But that book literally started this YouTube channel, so I have to put that up there. After that, What would be my favorite book? Lionel Johnson's Son in the Forest is always going to have such a special place in my heart now because of it returning Lionel Johnson to the fold. And then I feel like the other book that this channel owes its existence to is definitely going to be Beckwin Penitent. I don't know if it exists as one of 40K's best books, but for what it has done for this channel, it is quite substantial. There is a reason I talk about it so much, and that's because it is complete madness. In terms of 40K plot lines, and like if you read a lot of 40K, you'll definitely grow bored of certain novels. And there are certain things that you'll read if you feel like you're obligated to because you want to find out where the plot goes, but you're not particularly excited to read a relatively kind of copy and paste Tracer Warband story or Suffering chapter story where they're near to destruction. There are some things that are relatively, cut and dry, but that book just breaks all the rules. And I feel like kind of obligated to include it. I'll include a fourth, one that I just sort of really enjoyed reading. I think that actually Cypher Lord of the Fallen is very underrated because by John French, just such a well-written book in terms of doing something really different for a 40K novel, and it works really well. That book is basically, it's kind of written in parts. It's like Ocean's 11 or something like that. It's a heist book. And it just is so fun, and I love the character of Cypher so much that I just really enjoyed it. I have a heavy bias towards the Dark Angels, and I make no apologies for that. And to be fair, I'll allow you to have your biases as well, but it's tough. Yeah, there's always. I'll probably reevaluate that list later and go like, oh no, I shouldn't have said that, but there we go. Would you laugh if I said you look very similar to My Name Is Bife? I wouldn't, because I get that comment quite a lot. I don't actually know if he puts his face in videos, but I have heard that quite a lot, and I'm sure he's also an incredibly good-looking man. So no problems with that at all, mate. A bit late to the stream, but Imperium Secundus was also brought up in the Plague Wars books by the book about the reign of the Emperor Sanguinius. Yes, we actually just talked about that about 10 minutes ago, mate. Headcanon, Conrad and Sanguinius are symbolic twins. One is light, the other is darkness. One is humanity chained to monstrosity. The other is monstrosity chained to humanity. Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a symbolism there. Interestingly, there's this sort of suggestion in Conrad Kurtz's Primarch novel that his foresight is connected to his role, and he's kind of like the judge of the Primarchs, was what his original intention of Kurz was to have him be this kind of judge, which is very bizarre, and also is part of his descension into madness. But in terms of Sanguinius being the opposite to that, what's the opposite of a judge outside of a criminal? Sanguinius, yeah, I guess. Like Sanguinius, maybe he's the defense lawyer. Maybe he's the defense of humanity because he sees the good in people, or he offers another solution. I don't know. But yes, Sanguinius and Conrad, they have a battle in Pharos, which is one of the more entertaining battles because Sanguinius is basically in his pajamas, and they of course both have foresight, and so neither of them can really win this battle because they can see the future. You can respond to whatever they do. We need a duel between Fulgrim and Jagatai. Would be epic to fulfill Fulgrim's challenge against Jagatai in 40K. Yes, definitely. Definitely that one has to happen. The really interesting question is who should the Lion fight in like Dawn of War? I think Fulgrim's relatively likely just because he's a new release, and also they haven't really appeared much before in books against in like games or anything, the Emperor's Children, and the Fulgrim hasn't fought any Loyalist Primarch since his return, but there is, they're not the most family friendly chapter, are they? So I guess it depends. But yeah, I think the Lion is a swordsman, Fulgrim's a swordsman. It works. I wonder what the Scouring will cover next. I hope it involves Korax. Him being the only Loyalist Primarch not in Ashes of the Imperium was unfortunate. The thing is, I wouldn't say it's unfortunate, mate, if you're a Raven Guard fan. I think that weirdly makes me quite excited for the Raven Guard, because yes, it's true to say that you wanted to see him in there, but it means that they've planned something for him. Like he very clearly should have been there. So the lore of Corvus Corax meeting up with Leman Russ and the Lion during the Scouring, during the Horus Heresy and Siege of Terra, is relatively recent 40k lore. So it's not something they've forgotten about. It's just they've clearly planned something for Corvus, and I think that it's I'm excited to see what that is, because he also needs some love. Do you know what I mean? He gets a harsh journey in the heresy, so I think him getting some great accomplishment would be a really good way to finish off his story before he disappears. So I wouldn't be too down on that. I'd be excited. I think that if anything, like, it makes me a little bit, not like concerned, but a little, for like characters like the Lion and Russ, I don't think they've really planned much for them. I think they're just going to sort of be there for a bit and then they'll go home. I don't think they've really got a big plot lines planned. Obviously, the fall of Caliban and Leman Russ's Wolftime leaving his sons is a big deal, but at the same time, I don't think they're going to do too much in the initial Scouring kind of saga. But maybe I'll be wrong. We'll see. Who is stronger, Tigurius or Mephiston? I think definitely Mephiston is going to be the strongest. I mean, Mephiston's powers get a bit nuts. What I have started this prep actually, but that I will one day do a most ridiculous feats of Mephiston, and he can do things like stop time, and even Magnus the Red is concerned about his power and all this kind of thing. So Mephiston is a complete monster, but it's just I did a stream on it a while ago where there is this old lore where during the Ultramarines in their most egregious period, it was hinted that it even said that Mephiston might be the most powerful space marine in the Imperium, and so I sort of did a joke about that. I'm kind of new to 40k lore, but did the Chaos Primarchs ever meet before? Yes, both when they are before they were Demon Primarchs. All the Primarchs met at one point or another, so they definitely met before they ascended. But they also do meet as demons, and we don't see much of it. Like, for example, like there's a recorded war between the Primarch Mortarion and the Primarch Perturabo over something called the Temple of Ascension, I think it's called. And this is a piece of lore from a Death Guard Codex, and it talks about how they had a battle for 7 days, and Mortarion won that one. But we can be pretty confident that the Demon Primarchs fight each other all the time. All the time. So all of the Demon Primarchs that are assigned to one god, they are part of that god. They're like any other demon, basically. And so they're constantly fighting in the Great Game. And so they'll have battled one another time and time again. We don't see this, we don't know too much about it, but we can be pretty confident that that has happened. Then Perturabo, we know in the one time we see him in the 40k, we know that he's fought in, I think he says he's fought in 10,000 wars, something like that, right? He has a line like that where he throws it away, but basically no idea whose side he's on, but he gets involved in the demon wars and is constantly testing himself and improving his abilities and making new creations of war, etc., to use in his planned wars against the Imperium. But he's been battling against his brothers over and over again, so we can be pretty confident he gets involved. Maybe less so with Lorgar. Like maybe Lorgar hasn't fought against his demonic brothers, because for most of the Imperium's history, he's basically just been praying and recruiting cults and working to further the Chaos God's aims in that respect. But but like we can be pretty confident that will have happened. How would you predict Vulcan's return to the setting? Really tough one to predict, Vulcan, because of the fact that his disappearance is so strange. It's a tough, like, when the Primarchs disappeared, they disappeared with the writers I don't think they ever intended for them to come back. So they never intended to have the Fallen be redeemed to become the Risen, or some of them become the Risen. They never intended for the Lion to Guilliman to truly awake and lead the Imperium. This was all like made by Games Workshop long after the Primarchs were created. So Vulcan's disappearance is a weird one. We know that he created this sort of list of artifacts of Vulcan for the for his sons to find, and they found about half, just over half at this point. So, and in the Salamander supplement of 8th edition, they've got a sight of the next one, so they're working towards that. But some of the artifacts are grouped together, so maybe the Salamanders are near to completing this treasure hunt. But it said that once they've got all of these artifacts of Vulcan, they'll be able to find Vulcan and he'll return. But then in the Beast Arises series, the Vulcan temporarily returns. So he returns, he is found by an Imperial Fist, and he temporarily returns to the Imperium, leads them once more against defending against the Orcs, and then is supposedly killed in that battle. But of course, we know he's a perpetual and will survive, so he'll come back at some point. So putting all of that together is hard. Like, that's tough to rationalize all of that lore. Why did Vulcan create this weird treasure hunt? What was the purpose of it? Why did he abandon his sons? Why did he why did he temporarily return but didn't properly return? Like, the Imperium was in a dire position when Vulcan like disappeared for a second time. Not a good time to disappear. So what's going on? He also Vulcan kind of implies, because he says to the Imperial Fist that like I'll tell your father about you, and so he sort of implies that he knows Rogal Dorn's still around. So putting all of this together is a tough one to rationalize. And I would imagine that, like, for example, like the artifacts of Vulcan vary widely in what they can do. So one of them is a ship, one of them is a forge. There's one of them just like a flamethrower, like, yeah, one of them's a cape, one of them's a spear. Like they're all sort of all over the place. Maybe you get like a sort of situation where if they're all assembled in one place, you get kind of a map to Luke Skywalker type deal where they'll find a map to Vulcan. But will Vulcan still be in the same place? I would guess Vulcan being kind of the quote-unquote good guy, the Primarchs, I would guess that he will be on a world protecting human civilians somewhere, and when he is found by the Loyalists, when they discover where he is, he's basically just been, keeping a warp rift shut or serving the Emperor in some way. That's what I would guess. But Vulcan's return is probably the most important of the Primarchs as things currently stand, because he is the tech one, and the tech Primarch is probably the most important Primarch to have back. But yeah. War of the Beast is batshit lore. There is some batshit lore. It's one of those things. There is some good stuff on it. You have like that's where there's a Imperial Fist, Iron Warriors team up. You get kind of like there's little gems of like, oh, that's really crazy. But the things like the founding of the Death Watch, not very interesting. I think that gets a lot of hate. But yeah, early Inquisition lore is always really important. So yeah, we'll see. A map to Space King, yes, very much. Lewitton thinks Vulcan will be the next to return because it makes the most sense. Gonna need more than that, I'm afraid. But I mean, in terms of what makes the most sense to me, definitely the cut. Definitely, I'll be interested to hear what his reasoning is. What if the lion curb stomp decapitated a Chaos Primarch's head? If it was a Demon Primarch, the Demon Primarch will just come back. He'll be sent back to the warp, and then he'll return when he can, but which now is relatively quick. My guess is Vulcan's on Terra chilling with his dad. It was always a theory that like Rogal Dorn was in the throne room and protecting the Emperor and felt guilty for 10,000 years. So sort of yeah, not too out there really. I wonder how Guilliman will receive the lion after all these years. From what I hear, Johnson was kind of a tool back in the day, but now he's mellowed out a lot. How will that go down in your opinion? Yeah, so I guess we've talked about it quite a lot this stream, so I'm not going too into it, but I do think that it will be pretty mellow, and I think that because their reunion in the Heresy, and maybe I'll do a reading of actually in a future stream because it would be quite a lot of fun. It is really like a big moment in the Horus Heresy, and they have a very bizarre relationship, and yeah, it's just it'd be very interesting to have that in a stream to talk about how I think that will be a mirror to what happens in 40k, I think, weirdly. So we'll see. A 5 hours deep dive on the Lamenters would do wonders for your channel. Interesting. I mean, the Lamenters don't appear actually too much in lore. So they are definitely a very beloved chapter, and they are definitely like a big chapter with huge potential. Like the idea that you don't fall to the Red Thirst is a huge like caveat to them being a Blood Angel successor. So there's very clearly some sort of weird deal that they've made. So there's a lot to talk about. But outside of like lots, you know, they're definitely appear in like all the Blood Angels codexes, no reference from time to time, but we don't get too much on them, just like a big focus in the novels. So we will see. And I guess the reason I say that is because when I talk about how they just kind of like mentioned in like campaign books or codexes, a lot of that is going to be copy and pasted lore or with some slight tweaks. So the actual like quantity of lore that we have on them is not too great. But maybe I could put like I guess the other side of that is that it also means it's relatively easy to put together. There's not going to be too much contradictory lore or not with too much to go through. But we can do that. Morning, mate. Long one today. Yes, yeah. I mean, people seem to be enjoying it, so I'm still going. Even if I think Nogle's trying to get me. Does Mephiston get stronger when a Blood Angel falls to the Black Rage because he absorbed the Black Angel? Great question. Yes, I think so. I think that almost certainly does happen. I think that like it basically is a time buying measure. Like he's taken in the Black Angel to buy them time, but the Black Angel will win in time. So we will see. But yeah, I'd imagine so. But yeah, you know what? It's funny you say like doing a 5-hour Lamenter stream, because that is the kind of thing I do wonder about, like whether I should just do more of on this channel. Is just do like maybe like do like 2 streams a week or something like that, and not work on videos, but just prep for like a 5-hour stream on the Ultramarines where I've just got like a load of quotes to go through. And furthermore, I've just got like, I can just answer questions as they come, and then it can just serve as like a thing that will just sit on the channel. And then maybe I could download it afterwards, edit it, and just upload it as a video or give it to the editor. A wonderful editor, Ben. But yeah, I'm trying to get more videos done, but it's tough with a regular live streaming. I think this Friday I'll try and do something really kind of quick and like something that won't have too much prep, just for fun. Interesting lack of lore with Drukhari building their own golden throne. Yeah, it only really comes up in the one novel. But there are, so to be fair, there's a lot of references to the idea that they need something to fix Comorra. Like basically, it's well known now that the demons have been pouring into Comorra since the Great Rift. And there's this lore in like the Drukhari codexes, like Asdrubal Vect trying to use that to his advantage, where he positioned some of his enemies to that area of Comorra so that they'd be killed, or he has had to utilize a lot of resources to keep the demons at bay. But a follow up to the Drukhari trying to fix Comorra has to come. And like I say, I think that Mike Brooks's Eldar books have been received a lot better than previous Eldar books in my experience. I don't have the numbers, but I feel like that's the case. And I reckon if they're doing well, just give him Asdrubal Vect and give him the plot line of saving Comorra, because Asdrubal Vect will have to get a command barge model at some point, so you might as well get started. We float from the crag. Funny Ultramarines lore stream. Yeah. I remember when the Angels of Death Codex came out and it said the lion was healing and would return one day. Only took 27 years. I'm a rare old timer who loves the Primarchs and new lore. Yes, I know what you mean. Some people have their the old lore that they like, and so they just don't like new lore. And sometimes it is some of the weirdest comments that I get is when like I'll do a review of like a new book or whatever, we'll talk about a new plot line, and people will say that's not true, and then I'll be like, oh no, this is what the lore says, and they're like, no. No, I don't want it. And you're like, okay, cool. Like, and it's like it's a weird one, because you're totally allowed to say that you don't like the new lore and you like the old lore. I have very little problem with that. Really, I don't. But people that say they don't think the Horus Heresy should have been written, I think that's fine. Nothing against that. But when like I can only tell you what the books say. I can give you my opinions on them, and I try my best to go, this is what the books say, this is what I think. But if you like, if I tell you what the books say, you can't tell me what you can't tell me they don't say what I've read them say. Dude, so excited for the vids. Don't doubt your impact. Thanks, man. That means so much to get that kind of comment. Yeah, it really does. Still hoping they're finally going to pull the trigger on Malice Overthrow. They've been teasing since 5th edition. Yeah, fair enough, man. I mean, I am not a Eldar guy, so outside of Eldar Codexes, so I guess I probably would have read her, but I'll be honest, when she got her model, I'll be honest, I didn't have an immediate like, oh my god, Malice, you know, like I would do if it was like a famous Space Marine. But yeah, seeing the fans get quite excited for Malice is hype is contagious. So I am really excited for that, and I hope that she gets I think it's almost certain she'll get a model in the future, and a more complexity for Komara is only going to be good, right? So I think that her getting a bunch of lore big focus in future Drukhari novels would be great. And she is supposedly second to Asdrubal Vex in terms of Archons. So, hey, here we go. I don't get all the fuss about Banahab. So I think that it's a good question. So if you've paid for Warhammer TV, you can get access to the Vault as well, which is genuinely actually pretty good. Like if you are a 40K fan, and it's actually not a bad suggestion, I think, for the people who have never read anything before and looking to start reading Warhammer 40K. You can pay £6, $7, something like that, I think, and you get access to the Warhammer TV. You can watch everything in a month. There's not a lot of TV stuff, so it's not worth buying for the TV. But if you get access to the Warhammer Vault with it, which you do, then you get access to loads of old White Dwarfs, but also loads of old supplement lore and campaign lore. So you can read about some of the factions that you really like, and also if you played Warhammer as a kid, then it is pretty cool, I'm not gonna lie, scrolling through old like White Dwarfs and that kind of thing, but even like really old like Index Astartes stuff and that kind of thing. And within this you've got the Imperial Armor Tomes, and if you do read them, you will see that there is a big difference in how they're written. So you get more in terms of things like troop movements, and you get a lot more maps, and it's not written like a novel, it's written very kind of matter of fact. And that's where the novels I'm really excited for. So, for example, one of the videos I have got planned, probably a little while, but one of the videos I have got planned is on the Siege of Rax, because the novelization of the Siege of Rax was really like different to the Imperial Armor Tome. Tomes that cover it, because the Imperial Armor Tomes were, I think the novel was written for people who had already read the Imperial Armor Tomes, and it's a very weird, I think it'd be a very weird book to cover if you don't know anything about the Siege of Rax to start reading. But it gives you more like on the ground, what did things look like, how did the Krieg behave, and there's even it even follows characters that are mentioned in the Imperial Armor Tome campaigns, but you find out the reason behind their decisions, and some of them behave very differently in the book compared to the campaign. And it's a really interesting insight into the relationship. I might even end up tying it into like the Terminus Decree lore or something, because it'd be a really interesting insight into how Codex lore and or campaign lore and novel lore relate, and when something is true or something's a unreliable narrator and all that kind of thing. And I think that there's a lot of misconception that like novels are all unreliable narrators, or they get treated as such, and codexes and campaign books are always right, but that's not really true, and there's a lot more nuance to it than that. So I think that it's a really interesting one. But the Badab War, for example, a novelization of the Badab War would be a big deal, because we would find out, like with the Badab War, when it talks about the Carcharodons and their actions, it just describes it matter of fact, and they're just brutal, savage monsters. But it would be, you could completely flip that on its head, like with the Siege of Rax, where you give an insight into the Carcharodons behaving in such a way because they have to destabilize the plasma reactors, because or else the planet will be lost by some other thing that Huron Blackheart is doing, or look for Huron. And so it's kind of all over the place. So the novelizations are actually quite a big deal, I think, for that. And I think it will do really well. When Siege of Rax came out, it did phenomenally well, I remember. And so I think the Badab War book has got to come at some point. To clarify, I have no rumors or anything about that. I'm literally just guessing. But the Badab War is, yeah, it's so popular. I'm probably one of the very few YouTubers that have never done a video on it. But it's popular for a reason. Could Vashdor eventually create his own demon prince? If he was a god, yes. That seems to be a relatively defining aspect of what makes a Chaos God a god, is that they are so large and so powerful, they can create these demons in this respect. Vashdor has demons. So in the new Archmagos novel, we find out a lot more about Vashdor's forces and how they work, and he deploys a tiny fraction of them. And it's pretty cool, but he doesn't like create demons in the way that Khorne created Skarbrand. And as far as we know, he can't have demon princes. So in theory, it's possible as he gets more and more powerful, but he has to become a god for that to happen. So it would, yeah, definitely happen. I think a lot of people have theorized about the obvious connection between Vashdor and Perturabo, because both Perturabo is obsessed with machines and he creates demon engines, and Vashdor is obsessed with machines and creates demon engines. And we know that they've worked together at this point, and we know that they have they've been allied in the past. And part of the Archmagos novel, one of the lines of it is about Vashdor, and he ends up basically bringing these Iron Warriors into his thrall, and he actually kind of tricks them throughout the novel. So it's a really interesting idea. And so a lot of people have theorized about whether Perturabo might be a demon Primarch of Vashdor or something like that, which the justification is quite interesting because of the way the warp is timeless. So if Vashdor becomes a god in the future, he could have made Perturabo a demon Primarch in the past, something like that. You could definitely mess around with that kind of lore. And but despite that, it seems pretty likely that Perturabo is going to stay demon Primarch of Chaos Undivided because of the way the lore is written. But maybe you could see something like Vashdor, you know, we're talking about magic, right? We're talking about magic in the warp. So maybe you could see something about Vashdor kind of stealing Perturabo from the 4 Chaos Gods if Perturabo was willing. But it would be badass. Would you say that campaign books are closer to dossiers, information to get the Imperial forces to do what they need them to, more than correct lore? I mean, it depends on the... It's a tough one, yeah, because there definitely are some of them that are literally dossiers, some campaign books. So it's... yeah, it's definitely up there, but it's sort of all over the place. Like, for example, for me... I talked about this in the Terminus Decree stream, so I won't go into it now. But the most obvious explanation of the Terminus Decree is just that it's wrong. It's just that it's not true. And that sounds like, I know that sounds very dismissive, but I promise in the stream, I explain why, like, I think that. I truly believe it's just wrong, but the reason for that is based upon, like 6 novels. Like, so I'm not just saying, like, oh, I didn't like that law, so it's wrong. What I'm saying is that there is, I guess the gist of it is, when you have competing sources describing events, you have to look at which one is more likely to be correct. And I'm going to go with the 6 novels building a storyline over 1 paragraph in a codex. I've been binging your videos. I've learned so much. Oh, thanks so much, man. It really helps people binge the videos. It's the main thing YouTube likes, apparently. So, yes, definitely. If you watched a video, watch it again. Chuck it on in the background. It does really help the channel out. I wanted to stop by and say you make Warhammer lore very easy to follow without gatekeeping so many content creators. Oh, good, man. Good. I mean, I try to... I don't think I have a little bit of an edge sometimes because I try to read all of the books so I can often connect things all together. But... yeah, it's going to come down to whatever style you like the most. It did annoy me that Vashdor convinced Abaddon to help him with the Arks of Omen to find a weapon, and then when it's all over, he says, "We found the key. Now let's find the lock." What a letdown. To be fair, I kind of assumed that would happen. I can't remember his exact wording to Abaddon, but I sort of assumed that was where it was going to go. But I think the disappointing thing for me about the Arks of Omen campaign, about this sort of new storyline, is just because, as much of a defender of Abaddon as I am, okay, this is a bit of a weird take, even if it doesn't sound like it. The weird take that I have is that I generally speaking disagree with people when they'd be like, "Oh, Abaddon is just a failure and he's never accomplished anything." I think that is wrong and a misreading of the lore. But at the same time, I do think the fact that he has not pushed on to Terra quickly enough, or he is now changing course and working with Vashdor to create this, to find this weapon, is a bit disappointing to me, because at this the destruction of Cadia and the unleashing of the Great Rift should have been the greatest boon to him, and it's not. Now it's just like a stall tactic It's a stall tactic to keep the Imperium occupied until Abaddon can get his weapon. And I don't really like that so much. Technically, there is nothing saying no to Vashdor making demon princes or demons. Besides relinquishing power to another, it might be a calculus of power in him versus needed to give instead of a rule. Yeah, I'd have to. You know what? It would probably be. I know you're a big fan of the old Liber Chaotica, so I don't know if there's anything in there that might exist. But maybe I'm adding something there. But I feel like that's going to be the difference: is the ability to sort of make chaos. And certainly when Vashdor's demons, like Vashdor, I guess with Vashdor it's sort of an interesting one because Vashdor's demons are often demons that like owe him. That's how he binds them to his service. They because Vashdor makes deals with everybody, and Vashdor doesn't lie. And so one of the things that seems to happen is that you make a demon makes a deal with Vashdor, and if they can't pay the number of souls that Vashdor requires, then they are drawn into the service of Vashdor. That seems to be how it works. So given that that's how he operates, I'm just assuming, I guess. But I'd have to check. There's quite, through all the Chaos Demon codexes, I would guess there's something, but I might be wrong, to be fair. Ashes of the Imperium and the way it depicts Kirill Sinderman and his attitudes about the Warpix Extra definitely make me believe that the Terminus Decree being wrong just could be legit. I'm sticking by it. I mean, given how hard I did not expect Darren Jexanthus wink to appear so much in Ashes of the Imperium. I thought that was I was so blown away. I thought that I mean, even that they literally bring up the Terminus Decree and like, where is it? And like Malcador's body and all of this stuff, which is tying into Grey Knight's lore. So you're like, okay, they're like really pushing ahead with it. So we will see. Will we ever see the Fulgrim clone again? You know what? I don't think we've had a Fulgrim clone for a couple of streams mentioned, but good question. Very popular question. Will we see the Fulgrim clone again? It is one of the most popular fan aspects of the lore. People love it so much, and that's pretty well known. And the writers, we all know that Dan Abnett watches all my streams. We all know that James Workshop is always checking out my videos. So we know that in all seriousness, we do know that the Games Workshop and the writers, they do keep a weather eye on what the fans are interested in. It's pretty well known that the Fulgrim clone was very well received. And that's a good thing. That means that it's more likely that they'll follow up on it and do something similar because they want to write things that sell. However, the Fulgrim clone was written in the second novel of the Fabius Bile trilogy, which was written by Josh Reynolds, who no longer writes for Games Workshop. That's a bad thing for you guys because Games Workshop writers typically, although there's so much crossover, characters like the Fulgrim clone are the creation of a writer. It's not like Fabius Bile, who anyone will write. He was the creation of Josh Reynolds, and characters and writers don't like to. They don't. That's not saying they can't. They really can. There's nothing stopping them. They don't like to continue other people's storylines because it's just sort of. I guess people like to own their own work, sort of thing. Do you know what I mean? And it's obvious. And also, if you're ADB and you follow up from Josh Reynolds' Fabius Bile trilogy, you risk the fans being like ADB ruined Josh Reynolds' trilogy. So it's sort of a problem because like that makes it less likely. But like I say, they very much will know that it's such a popular fan theory. They will know that how much people like it. It's definitely an option. As to whether it will be in the near future, I doubt it. I don't think they would return a clone Fulgrim before Loyalist Primarchs. There is a fun chapter called the Sons of the Phoenix, they're in Space Marine too. They're like an official Imperial Fist successor chapter, but they are white and purple. They are obsessed with like perfection, and they're called the Sons of the Phoenix. So they're very likely successors to Fulgrim, and we know that Belisarius Cawl definitely wanted to create successor chapters from Traitor Geneseed, and Guilliman told him no, but Belisarius Cawl does whatever he wants. So it's pretty likely that he's got a Space Marine chapter. So a lot of people like to believe that you have a Fulgrim clone return and one day lead the Sons of the Phoenix. And I don't want to douse your hopes too much. I think it's not impossible, but I reckon it will be an after all the Loyalists return. You'd get something like that. Ricardo, yet even so, there are undoubtedly smaller whirlpools within the ether, lesser vortices that spin around the fringes of greater powers, growing, converging, dividing, and eternally moving. Okay, so dividing. Yeah, I guess that does suggest. Fair enough, fair enough. But I don't know, or is that talking about the creation of demons? Interesting, interesting. I know you want me to do something on Liber Chaotica. I'll have to at some point. I am doing something on like Chaos Gods in the future, so I'll definitely have to find something from there for that. Plus him and Xanthus are buddies now. I can see him pulling a fast one and creating a failsafe to keep Biggie on the throne, and just telling them it was a message from the Emperor. Maybe. Hi Sandman, thank you so much, Super Chat. It's my 30th birthday. Happy birthday, man. I'm so excited to see the story moving forward. What is something you want to see moving forward? Thanks, man. Happy birthday. Ooh, I mean, the Lion is like my favorite character. Well, actually, you know what? Answer the question. My favorite character is Cypher in 40K. Cypher is definitely my favorite character, and I loved him since I was a kid. So seeing him get his own novel, that was the only time I've had a reaction that was comparable to the reveal of the Lion's return. But yeah, he needs his lore to move forward too, because I want to see the lore of Cypher in the Horus Heresy was really good. Dan Abnett has clearly planned out what he wants to happen with Cypher, and the identity of Cypher is a mystery, but it has deep roots in the heresy, so we can kind of put together who we think it is. And I personally believe it's definitely Corswain, or I don't mind the whole Corswain mixed with Zahariel, but I'm still betting on Corswain. So Corswain getting, or Cypher getting a follow-up storyline makes the most sense, and yeah, that's definitely the storyline I want to move forward. I'll try and do a couple other answers just because it's maybe do something non-Space Marine. I would really like to see Case of the Tau get a new novel. He appears he's mentioned in like the Farsight books, and he's even mentioned in Shadow Sun's book. But Case is where you have Farsight and Shadow Sun, where you have Farsight of Monk Ka and Shadow Sun of Kion. Case is Monat. He's like the lone warrior, and he's like the smartest of the three allegedly, and he's incredibly brilliant. And he appears in a book called War of Secrets, which is also a Dark Angels novel. And in that, he takes on like a whole Dark Angel successor chapter by himself in a Ghost Kill battlesuit, and basically wins and then escapes. So he is phenomenally powerful as a Tau character, and I really would like to see him return to get like a novel and a model. I think that would be so good. And then yeah, I would really like the Craftworld Eldar to get a bump. It makes it like when I read like a Voidsguard, it did give me a yearning to see Eldar get some lore that people felt really engaged with, because people really like the Corsairs lore. I think that they thought that they were a lot of fun, and they're a bit more hopeful, and there's options. And Grimdark is a weird thing, because Grimdark is like Games Workshop did the whole like everyone's fucked, everyone's going to die, there's nothing you can do, we're all doomed for years, and their company nearly got destroyed, because the truth is it's not as popular, I think, as some fans will have you believe. And I think that giving the Eldar some a plot line to move forward and some hope in the galaxy makes the lore more interesting. And you can still have Grimdark lore, but then it hits harder because it's Grimdark in a world where, I mean, maybe they'll pull it off, and then they don't, and then it still hits hard. So you can still have everybody die. It's just give them a plotline to move towards, you know. What do you think when the Imperium finds out Lionel Johnson is back, and the reaction? I definitely think that you could see some factions wanting to turn the Lion against Guilliman. That makes a lot of sense. So we know, for example, that some of the custodians, we don't know how they view the Lion, and the Lion is, as people have mentioned multiple times in chat, understandably, famously a bit of a knob. So it makes sense that the custodians wouldn't particularly like the Lion, but we don't actually see them interact in the lore. So maybe they do. Maybe they're good friends, and maybe the custodians always liked the Lion because the Emperor made him first, or something like that. But we do also know that the custodians are very worried, or at least some of them are, that Guilliman is going to turn traitor, Guilliman will turn against the Emperor, etc. And they are preparing for that scenario, even if they also believe he's the best hope for humanity right now. So if they decide that they've had too much of Guilliman, they might try and use the Lion against Guilliman. That would be a good plot line to use in the future. in terms of everybody else reacting, Space Wolves definitely the most interesting one. Seeing them, going over to find out that the lion has returned. We spoke before on the channel. We do get Ragnar Blackmane's reaction to the lions returning, and he's pretty chill with the lion returning. He just says, I mean, there's the Space Wolves are currently doing war against the orcs in modern 40k, and then they had Armageddon, but in modern 40k they've had a lot of battles against the orcs and Gazgul in particular, and Ragnar's like, look, there's enough enemies of the Imperium to go around. If the lion's back, I'm fine with it. Just put him to work. And so like, some of them will be cool with it, but I think that Logan Grimnar in particular, and Bjorn the Fell-Handed will have some words, some choice words for the Primarch of the Dark Angels. So that would be a really big one. But yeah, in terms of like other successor chapters, most of them and first foundings, most like first founding chapters, I think most of them would typically prefer Guilliman to the lion historically. Whether new kind of humble noble lion is preferable, fair enough. But historically, they'd have preferred Guilliman. And yeah, I mean, specifically, like there's so much they could do. Like, for example, we don't actually know. Maybe the Primaris Marines were a step too far for Guilliman, or maybe Cool is a step too far for the Lion, sorry. And so maybe the Lion will have some problems with what Guilliman's done, but it's, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, it's a tough one. The Unremembered Empire causing a problem is the thing that has been set up in the Dark Imperium series, so we will see. Thunderhawk, thank you so much. We all know what I'm excited for. 1 Korax, 2 Valdor, obligatory King in Yellow comment. Yes, thank you, brother. So, yes, to be fair, I didn't actually say Beckwin. yeah, Beckwin's also, yeah, I guess it goes without saying. I'm excited to see that, but yeah, Korax getting a follow-up. One of the streams I have got planned is on the Book Apocalypse, so I will talk a little bit about him there. But I will, yeah, I actually did a stream on Corvus, so do check that out. But yeah, exactly what, yeah, they've clearly planned stuff for Corvus in the Scouring, so I imagine that will just bleed into 40k. Could you do a video on minor warp powers like local saints, local figures that are worshipped around the Imperium and beyond it? The etheric entities that are formed from memories and experiences of such persistent, though mundane activities such as housework or farming tend to be very minor spirits in folklore. Creatures that barely have the power and sentience to do more than ensure a good fire in a hearth or help with the curdling of milk. Great quote. Oh, sorry. Yes. Now, that is a good question. And I think it's something that does come up. It would probably do quite well, actually. I think it's something that does come up quite a lot is, to your passage there, Ricardo, is why aren't there more kind of minor warp gods that are like kind of good? Because why, you know, we know that, you know, excess and blood and decay can create powerful beings, but whilst maybe they're not as strong, feelings of love and compassion and yeah, other kind of nobler ideas should have an impact on the warp. Why don't we see them? And yeah, I guess that kind of lore explains it away. But I also kind of, maybe this is my headcanon, so I have to double check, but I feel like there's going to be something in how like Nurgle, as the god of decay and death, he's also the god of rebirth. So I've always liked the idea that Nurgle sort of absorbs minor warp gods that are attributable to his kind of his kind of actions, because and he kind of takes them into himself. And that's like in the Siege of Terra, when the demons are summoned, their summoning is announced as like the gods of life, pleasure, war, and change, or something like that. So the chaos gods can have like a nobler spin if you try. Dante will have to play the role of Sanguinius and stop them from arguing. Potentially. Did GW ever explain why Malkador didn't come back yet? Could the Golden Throne remove the perpetual status of someone who uses it? I think certainly that's the case. Even if it isn't directly mentioned, we can sort of see that his soul is being burned up when he's on the Golden Throne. And we know, for example, that even like Magnus the Red is powerful enough that he can permanently kill a perpetual. So the Golden Throne definitely, I think, consumed his being. So I think that I would guess it's mentioned. I'm not going to pretend I can remember the exact quote, but I would guess there's a mention of why he doesn't come back, isn't his soul is being burned. But yeah, if not, it seems pretty reasonable to assume. Probably won't see it, but I would love for Caiaphas Cain to somehow team up with the Lion of Guilliman for an entire novel or trilogy. Yeah, I mean, to be fair, not impossible. Not impossible. And I guess probably the thing that they'd worry about is it would just overshadow the Caiaphas Cain stories that you were in if you introduce that, and they work well just on their own. And people like that, like human eye view of the Imperium. Why isn't honor an emotion that's reflected in the warp, seeing as how it's so strong, the Astartes, even the in the Astartes, even the Chaos ones. So yeah, as Max has put, so it's even kind of Khorne has that sort of that kind of he is that kind of god of like war code and that kind of thing as well. And it's not something that really comes up much in the lore because he is of course the blood god, which typically is the dominating aspect of Khorne that we all know and love. But yeah, he does also have that within him. And for example, it does manifest, I guess, in ways, and some of this is you're going to have your own headcanon, but for example, when like Abaddon wants to bring Angron under his control, he can there's a set of rules that Angron has to follow, and if Abaddon fulfills Angron's tests, in that case it's just fighting a crap ton of bloodthirsters, Angron is thereafter bound to Abaddon's Black Crusade for a time. And so it does make sense that Khorne does have the blood god within him, but I think the main way you would interpret that is because Khorne has to ally with the other chaos gods at a certain point, and if he was just the blood god, he would never do any of this. So yeah, maybe it's reading between the lines there, but I think it's pretty reasonable. Hey, Remembrancer, welcome back. Welcome back. Good to see you back on your channel, mate. I was saying earlier, actually, your channel is just back. In fact, I should say, I think, I don't know when it's out, but Amber King messaged me today. So I did a podcast with Amber King for Lorecast a couple of months ago now, but it'll go live in the next week or so, I think. And we're talking about Descent of Angels. So yeah, I'm one of the few people that will defend Descent of Angels, so I actually talk about why I like it. We do talk about the criticisms of the book as well, but I actually quite like that novel, and so I actually totally recommend it for any Dark Angels fan. It's actually pretty good, but the last third of it is just very different pace and very strange. But it's yes, that'll be live at some point, I guess. I don't know if you know, Andy, but yeah, should be up later this month. Sorry, I stand corrected. I think Caiaphas Cain's story should remain Primarchless because I love it for what they are for their stories. They are so human and what makes them special. Maybe a Salamander's cameo, but no Primarch, please. I mean, can you imagine if they introduced a Primarch and then Caiaphas Cain goes toe to toe with the lion, even for just like a few seconds? It would be so good. Yeah, fair enough. If you're not familiar, Caiaphas Cain fights a World Eater at one point. He is injured, but he does fight World Eater. Amazing. Khorne has martial pride in its portfolio. Yeah, I think that's, I don't know if it's specifically mentioned or whether it's just, I'm assuming it, but I think it's pretty likely. Case has the coolest description in a book ever: a warhead shot into the future for when the Tau have need of a doomsday weapon. Yes, I mean, it's a Case as a character, like in War of Secrets, he's put in like this weird stasis where he can't move, but he is still awake. So he's kept in stasis awake for, I think, a century or maybe two, and Tau only lived for like 40 years. So he has been alive for far longer, awake for far longer than he should have been. So he's basically been tortured for a long time, which is why he flees the Tau Empire, why he leaves. And in the later Tau Codexes, there are references to Case basically implying he has been captured and brought back into the fold. But he is, yeah, he is a really interesting character. I kind of think of him as like Serenity. I don't know if you ever watched Firefly, but it's the Tau's Serenity. It's like this. He is described as the living weapon. And so it's yeah, he's not like a psycho or anything, but he does have that ability, and he takes on a whole Space Marine chapter pretty much by himself. Does a good job. So it's you gotta give respect where you can. I love that Guilliman is initially so upset that all his brothers are to return. It had to be the Lion, because Guilliman would still Guilliman would still think of the Lion in the context of pre-heresy self. Yes, I think so. I mean, Guilliman's reaction to seeing Cypher in 40k definitely tells us that Guilliman is not over what the Lion did. And he sees the Lion sword, he very clearly, because it was, I have to blame him. Yeah, but he very clearly has a reaction to the Lion sword where he is thinking about how the Lion betrayed him, the Lion bombed Illyria, broke the rules, and therefore Guilliman broke the Lion sword over his knee. And so the sword causing that kind of reaction tells us that Guilliman hasn't forgotten what the Lion did to his homeworld. But at the same time, the Lion is a pretty different character now, and Guilliman is going to be happy to not be on his own, I imagine. So we will see. And I guess it's because part of it comes from, with the Lion being so different in 40k, I think it sort of lends to this idea that we don't just want 40k to become Horus Heresy 2.0. There's a point in the Silent King novel, the one that came out last year, where the Silent King says you're just fighting the same civil war, which hurt me, not just as an Imperium fan, but as a 40k fan. I was like, oh yeah, that's basically true. And so like we don't just want to have a complete repeat. So when the Primarchs will return, which will happen someday, we don't want, you know, Rogor Dawn on Terra being the Praetorian, Guilliman and Ultramar defending that. We want all the Primarchs doing different things, and changing their locations is an easy way of doing that. So having Guilliman on Terra, the Lion in Imperium Nihilus, the Lion no longer seeking to be something like a War Master, but seeking just to kind of serve humanity, makes it a big change. And so I think that their reunion is another way of making that clear, that where in the Heresy they're these kind of young, boisterous men that basically are, you know, some sort of perverse brotherly rivalry. In 40k, they're sort of over that, and they can put all that behind them and move on. And this makes it very clearly distinct from what happens in the Heresy. But we'll see. Yeah, sorry, I think it was the second part of that question. Maybe I've been streaming too long. But yes, anyway, sorry if I missed that. Oh, people like Firefly. Interesting. I watched the Ember King collab with Brookie on Adeptus Ridiculous, bro. Schooled them on the law. Fair enough. Fair enough. A Lion will do G-Man wrong until he sees my Crowboy emo edgy Corax and goes, what the actual F, and just hug. Yeah, I think that like Corvus's return is important, I guess, in the context of his journey in the Heresy and in the Scouring, I guess, continuing, is a lot of it is him understanding what the Primarchs are and what the Space Marines are. And that means that his return is sort of impactful, because just as we see the Lion unlock this kind of forest walking ability, all of the Primarchs can have some kind of cool ability that they'll unlock in the future. And Corvus Corax understanding that the Primarchs are all warp stuff underneath their skin, and therefore the true extent of their abilities is far beyond what they previously know. And so the Lion shouldn't be slower, Guilliman should have more abilities, they should all be Psykers. Like Corvus's return could have a huge impact in that respect, which would be pretty cool. Just to say, the Lion is not going to be happy. The ecclesiarchy and religion is in charge of the Imperium. So he isn't happy. Like, this obviously comes up in his return novel, right? Like, he runs into human beings who worship the Emperor as a god. And he's actually surprisingly chill with it. He's obviously kind of like Guilliman. He's not happy about it, but he's got bigger fish to fry, and so that's what he's working on. Guilliman doing all he can after slowly becoming like his father and realizing it would be a nice text part. I don't know what that means. So, has anybody seen Perturabo? That guy is scary, even if you are a heretic. Yeah, I mean, to be fair, the Perturabo is one of the few like Primarchs where his sons basically still worship him. They believe that he did everything right and he kind of crushed the heresy. So they don't really have an issue with Perturabo too much. Why do people never talk about Magos? It seems very telling in where the Inquisitor finale is coming. I guess. I think it's because Magos is designed to connect the two series, and Magos is definitely the book that amps the scale, because previously to Magos, in terms of the Ravenna series and the Eisnon series, I guess mainly Ravenna, it's a much lower stakes, isn't it? And then Magos goes all of a sudden massively raises the stakes. But then it's in Beckwin Penitent, which is also the latest novel and has been for a long time, so that's why people talk about it so much. In Penitent, there's so much crazy stuff that happens. It's just hard. It just dwarfs everything. Like the Imperial, the City of Dust, the Immaterial College, the Craft Welders, the Thousand Sons, the Emperor's Children, Alfarius, all of this stuff. Like some of this stuff just dwarfs entire series in terms of its impact of the setting. And some of the things I mentioned there get like lines, sentences talking about them, and you're like, what the, whoa, that's a big development just to drop into a book, damn it. Like, so it's why it gets talked about so much, because it's just madness. Dude, I'm a hardcore fan of Warhammer 40K. I've bought like 110 books, read like 75 of them, but you are the best Warhammer 40K lore guy in the internet, and I respect you more than my... Yeah, thank you so much. I of course demand all of my subscribers prefer me to their spouses and partners, so that's absolutely in line with what I'd expect. Thank you, brother. 110 books, that's really good going. I actually have very few physical books myself because I'm a Kindle man, but my brother has bought me some for Christmas, so they'll slowly start appearing in the background. I'd like to get, now that they're doing this like new shorter version of the Heresy, I'm trying to get my hands on all the physical Heresy books just to have as a collection, and I feel like it's a worthwhile investment, and I don't think my wife can argue against that. Hey Samuel, it's just dawned on me that I don't know the answer. Do you collect any 40k army, and if so, which one? Yes, sorry, so I don't know you can really tell, but there's two cabinets here and they're both full of Warhammer. So in 40k, I have a Dark Angels army, I have a Black Legion army, I have a Tau army, and a Genestealer Cults army. And then in 30k, I have Dark Angels again. So it's, between them, I always find that there's always something to play, because there's also Kill Team, and I have Kill Teams for like all of those armies, of course. And between 40k, 30k, and Kill Team, like now I'm mainly into 30k, like the new... Terminators arrived the other day. Oh. There you go, Games Workshop, shout out. 30k is the one I'm most interested in at the moment, but part of that is because when you're at the end of an edition, it's sort of a weird time. It's sort of a weird time because there's lots of kind of fun rules that come out at the end of an edition, as is coming now, but like everybody that only plays kind of casually, sometimes I don't have too much time to learn the rules, and if the rules are going to change in the near future, I'm more interested in focusing on a game system that I'll be able to play for a few years to come. So I'm mainly on 30k right now, but I am very excited for 11th edition, and like everybody, when the new edition comes around, that normally gives me a huge kind of bump. Indexes, when the new edition starts, we normally go into like an index period where people don't have their codexes yet, so they just use indexes. But normally that's quite like a wild and fun part of the edition for me. So I don't really mind that so much. No Blood Bowl teams. No Blood Bowl teams. I do have an Age of Sigmar army. I have Ossiarch Bone Reapers, but I don't really play it. Sorry. And I do have Lord of the Rings, of course. I mean, who doesn't? Ed, would you fancy some Horus Heresy books? I have to start a collection. Yes, I mean, let me know which ones, because I've already got a bunch of them, and I yes, but yes, I'll definitely take them off your hands if it's ones I don't have. Ooh, Genestealers. Do you see any way that the Steelers could get a big narrative push? They're kind of janky in place in terms of relevance. Yes, you are right. They're sort of I mean, they're literally like a leftover problem of the Tyranids, right? And the Tyranids themselves don't really have narrative like other factions, because they don't have a range of emotions that other races have. I think that like High Fleet Tiamat is definitely the most interesting High Fleet, but outside of that, there's not too much to really do with the Tyranids. They just will attack, and then they'll get defeated, and then they'll attack, and they'll get defeated. But the Genestealers, you definitely can do stuff, right? Because For example, we had the Gene Stealer cult on Terra, and allegedly that's been destroyed now. But the idea that like a Gene Stealer survives and starts a new one is not a big problem. But there's also a lot you can do with Gene Stealers. So a lot of people, one of the very understandable questions people ask is like, what's the difference between a Patriarch and a Broodlord? Because the models are non-identical, and it's a very fair question. The difference is age primarily. So a Broodlord is a creation of the hive mind to act as a leader beast for the Gene Stealers. And when you see a Gene Stealer, like in well, isn't it Space Marine 2, not in Space Marine 2 yet. When you see a Gene Stealer, that Gene Stealer is probably hours old. It's not particularly old at all. And when you see a Patriarch, that Gene Stealer is probably like hundreds or maybe even thousands of years old. So I like the idea of a Gene Stealer cult story based around some sort of like ancient Gene Stealer, a really old Broodlord that's been working towards something for thousands of years, and it's particularly well ingrained within a world that just nobody knows about it. There is Necromunda. Necromunda is also a great like little treasure trove of Gene Stealer cult lore. So yeah, you've got that. The Mouse Train Gene Stealer models are also just incredible. But yes, you are right. They're never going to be like a central faction within the setting, but they can definitely have a series. And like Gene Stealer cult lore is actually pretty dark. It's actually pretty dark because, of course, the nature of how Gene Stealer cults reproduce is, by most people's description, kind of sexual assault of some kind. So they are pretty dark books. You basically use people as incubators. Can I ask you this? 30k Dark Angels versus 41k Ultramarines. Who is the best legion for the Imperium? Well, I guess if you're going... It depends what you mean by best legion for the Imperium. In terms of... Like 30k Dark Angels, in theory, before the Fallen... The Dark Angels are this legion that is like just absurdly good. And some of the quotes around the Dark Angels are just ridiculous. So in the Lion's novel... There's this bit where it's said that the Lion has left more worlds behind him than any two of his brothers. So the Dark Angels, by the time of the Lion's Primarch novel, which is pretty late into the Great Crusade, the Lion had left more worlds behind than the next two best Primarchs put together. Ridiculous as things go. Just absurd. And this is after the Rangda. So... It's just kind of a ridiculous feat for the Lion to have. And the reason for that, I think, actually makes sense because of what the Dark Angels become. Because the Dark Angels in 40k are not the Dark Angels Legion from 30k that left more worlds behind than any two of their brothers. They're a twisted, malformed, deficient version of it. And like to the degree that like Azrael's kind of purpose within the Dark Angels narrative, when Luther meets Azrael in the lore, Azrael is the first Dark Angel in 10,000 years Luther's seen that actually acts like a Dark Angel, like they used to. He isn't just this kind of like manic, crazy space marine who's trying to find that information on Cypher and the Fallen and just torturing him and getting nothing out of it. So it's all, not enough out of it. But that's sort of like the purpose of the Dark Angels, that they were once great. So the Dark Angels, I'm always going to back the 30k Dark Angels. I'm always going to back the potential of the Dark Angels in 40k. But in terms of like just sheer numbers of 41k or 42k Ultramarines, you kind of got to hand it to them. I mean, it's said in the Space Marine Codex that there are more Sons of Guilliman than all other Space Marines put together. So most Space Marines are Sons of Guilliman, to the degree that like even like Huron Blackheart, he thinks that he's probably an Ultramarine. That's probably what he is. Because everyone's an Ultramarine. I've heard speculation that 11th is going to be more of an update and going to be a bookend with 10th edition. Allow you to use your 10th edition codex until your 11th edition comes out in lieu of indexes. I'm all right with that. Your codex stays relevant for longer. I think that's good. It makes people happier. But also, one of the things that sort of annoys me sometimes with the rules is sometimes I feel like they change the rules because they feel like they need to change the rules. They're like, oh, it's a new edition, we need new terrain rules. But sometimes it's like, well, what if the people liked the old terrain rules? That it's one of those things where you can never make everybody happy. But if 40k fans are generally all right with a thing, leave it, because it's just, you can only really make it worse. And I think that it's the case that yeah, that if they're using 10th edition as a basis for 11th and not changing too much, that's pretty good. The Patriarch of Cain was such a cool concept. Shame it was tied to a dead series. Yeah, it was a cool concept. I also don't think it made any sense. I don't really know how you can have a Patriarch of Cain, but it was a really cool idea. You could tell some writer was like, that's awesome. I'm totally what if the reason that it is due to how many expeditionary fleets were led by the Dark Angels, so were compliances given to the Lion's Legion? Maybe. But to be fair, the Lion is found about halfway through the Great Crusade, and so it specifically mentions the Lion has left more worlds behind him. So you can maybe explain it something like that, and you could also maybe explain things like there's a law about in the background lore. There's a suggestion that the Alpha Legion was secretly the largest legion, because everything they do is secretive, and so perhaps it's the case that actually the Alpha Legion dwarfed the Lion's achievements because the Alpha Legion were just conquering worlds all over the place and assigning them to random legions and not taking credit. And that's why no one knows about them. But there's lots of ways you could explain why your legion is better than the others. But it is, as quotes go, quite outrageous. I think even as a Dark Angels fan, I read that and I'm like, woof, okay. Yes, the Lion was just after Guilliman, I think, wasn't he? 11th found. I think in Avenging Sun, all the Primaris Marines were from all the legions equally. I think Guilliman even said the dominance of Ultramarines was coming to an end. Interesting. I don't remember that quote, but I'll double check. That's yeah, maybe I'm wrong. I'm pretty certain even in the 9th edition Codex it says that, which is after Avenging Sun. Euron Blackheart is an Ultra Smurf, so not necessarily, but he's likely an Ultra Smurf just because most of them were. Would like to see some lore on the 11 gene lines of Primaris. The cool, definitely never made up. Definitely, yes. That's actually probably a relatively easy video to do. It's because there are times that they use the Primarch as the equivalent of the Legion instead of making separation. You can try that, but I don't think that's what the Lion is saying in that sentence. But I mean, hey, you can explain away whatever you want, man. Whatever you want. Other thing I was dying to ask you is, this is the law of the third company of the Ultramarines. There is this law that the third company of the Ultramarines are the best Tyranid killers, but we have the second company in Space Marine 2 games fighting the Tyranids. Why? Because there are a lot of Tyranids and they're all over the place. So the second company will be fighting them as well, is basically the idea. The third company as well, sorry. Thoughts on Dawn of War / Horus Heresy placing Kronos to the east of Ultramar, but the new books, Sons of the Forest, Titus, apparently imply he's approaching Guilliman from the west, and he's in Dawn of War 4, so set after. Yeah, great question. In terms of the direction he's approaching, it would depend on where he crossed the rift from, because you can't just cross it wherever. So, in terms of where Cronus is, I'm not Cronus, I keep saying Cronus. So I don't think it's in the it's listed on the map, is it? Not any of the modern maps that they've done. But yes, in terms of it being in the west. So the reason that is useful is because the Great Rift does bisect a little bit Ultramar. So the Dawn of War 4 could be set on the other side of the Great Rift. And so my guess is that Dawn of War 4 is set quite a long time before, well, not massively so, but like maybe decades or so before Guilliman, the Lion goes to Ultramar, like Macragge, Central Park. So that's what I'm going to guess is happening. But yes, it is all over the place. And again, classic examples we talked about earlier of the lore can be very hard to follow. The timelines don't make sense. for people who are new to Warhammer 40k, it must always be very weird because you would assume Dawn of War 4 is right at the forefront of 40k lore. You would assume that because Titus's new lore is right at the forefront, and therefore these things happen around the same time, but they could be decades apart. They could be, yeah, they could be very far apart, and that would probably be my guess. Is that it takes place. The Dawn of War 4 is an Imperium Nihilus, and it's on the other side of the Great Rift, and that's where the line's coming from. But I'd love to be wrong and find out that the Titus has directed the Lion to go and save this world from helping the Blood Ravens out. Maybe the Lion's trying to pay his dues and show that he's a team player. Who knows? Anyway, I think we're 3.5 hours in, so I'm gonna call this stream there. I'm probably just gonna leave this one up unedited because it's way too long. But thank you so much for watching, everybody. So many people watched this stream. I had a great time doing it. Thank you so much to everyone that supports this. I'll be streaming again on Friday. So I will see you all then. But thank you so much to everyone that supports the channel. If you do want to help the channel out, please do subscribe and like the channel. I think you can also boost a video, I think someone was saying. So yes, do that as well if it gives you the option. And if you want to join the channel, you can click the join button below and get access to more content and member streams in the Discord as well. So yeah, I think that's everything. Thank you so much to everybody. It's been an absolute pleasure. I am losing my voice, and I will see you all in a couple of days.